Good evening. Welcome to the February 16, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. All members of the commission are present. Ready? We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Same for Wickets.
Jerome, you want to introduce staff?
Yes. Jerome Fournier, Director of Planning and Development.
Sean Scherow, Engineer Review Agency.
Eric Poche, Parish Planner.
Stacy Webb, Recording Secretary for Planning Commission.
Spencer Long, Parish Attorney.
Thank you very much. Chairman's comments. I just want to make it brief of how we're going to handle the public hearing. We've got a couple of house cleaning items, and then we're going to open up the public hearing for these proposed ordinance amendments. At the time that we open up the public hearing, the first thing we're going to do is give the parish consultant an opportunity to make his presentation. When that concludes, we're going to open up the public hearing for public comments. Once those are completed, we will then come back to the commission for us to discuss these items. And we will be discussing each item separately. Okay? So any staff report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you'll see the normal subdivision list in front of you. There have been no changes other than the fact that we have had the pre-construction meeting for Pelican Crossing 6 filing. They're set to scheduled to begin sometime in the first middle part of April. And then we had also had the pre-construction meeting for Windermere Crossing. And they're going to do the work on Cannon Road, and we anticipate that more than likely within the next 30 days, beginning work on that. But other than that, everything else has remained the same. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions? All right, engineering staff report?
No report this evening.
Okay. All right, next item is minutes, acceptance of minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion approved. Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Next item is ordinance public hearing to recommend approval or denial to the Parish Council amendments to the Ascension Parish Land Development Code. Item 10A, modifications of the Ascension Parish Unified Land Development Code Appendix 4, Subdivision Regulations, Sections 1, 17-2082-B, Fence Requirements. It is a new section. Item 2 is 17-405, Preliminary Prep Procedure. Item number 3 is item 17-4021, large-scale development. Number 4, 17-4032, street requirements. Item number 5, 17-4032.B, access and connectivity, a new section. 6, 17-4037, servitudes, utilities and drainage requirements. 7 is 17-4039, block requirements. And the last one is 17-4060, traffic impact analysis, TIA, replaces attachment A, TIA policy. The first thing is for us to have the parish consultant make his presentation. So Tariq, if you're online, can you please proceed?
John, if we could get Tariq on the screen, please.
Hear me?
We can hear you now, sir.
Okay. Let me know when to proceed. I heard Jerome chime in there momentarily.
You're good to go.
Okay. I don't have a lengthy presentation until we get to that point when we're going through line item by line item and section by section with the full body commission. But I will just share a couple of highlights at the beginning and walk you through tonight's agenda. So as the chairman just presented, the list you see on the screen there are all of the sections that were edited in any way, shape, or form as part of this batch 1 update. Just for everybody who may be tuning in from afar, the parish hired our firm, Kendall Keys Collaborative, last summer to talk to them about how we might address some immediate growth management concerns through some interim code updates. And that is what brings us here tonight. Following this first batch of amendments, we will also go into a second batch of amendments with the idea that both of these batches would go through both the Planning Commission and the Parish Council, reviewed by the public prior to adoption, which would hopefully occur before the expiration of the development moratorium set to expire in the middle of April of this year. So this is the first batch. We have been working closely with staff to make sure that we have dotted the I's and crossed our T's to be able to get to this point this evening. One thing that we will not cover with the commission tonight are just some of the things that we call general housekeeping. And those are, as we're looking through the ordinance updates for growth management purposes, we also tighten up language. Instead of saying must, we say shall. We've used consistent names and titles of both individuals, like the designated engineer review agency, or the Office of Planning and Development, the subdivider. We just wanted to make sure that the ordinance is written consistently. We have reduced the length of some paragraphs where possible. That wasn't the focus of these immediate amendments, but while we were in there drafting, there were times when we just made things shorter because we could say it in fewer words, which is a main practice of ours. And then finally, using active language where it's currently written passively, tried to make some of those corrections as well. We're not going to talk about those in detail tonight, but just wanted to make sure that you were aware. That will conclude the presentation. The rest of the slides here actually start going through the individual sections, highlighting the updates that you saw in the packet. So I believe I should pause there so that you can go into the public hearing portion.
So at this time, I think it's best that you go ahead and proceed with your full presentation.
Okay, I will do
Once
that.
you finish the presentation, we're going to then go to public comment, and then we're going to take each item separately with you, okay? So
Okay,
let's just finish
that will work. So the first section is a new section of the code. You don't currently have fence requirements, and so this establishes a new set of requirements. The main goal of this is to keep fences out of drainage servitudes. You see an image to the right there. That was one that we took when I was visiting in November. And fences like these can create issues during major storm events. So we've established some minimum standards, minimum height requirements, maximum height requirements rather, some minimum material standards. These would apply to all new and existing developments throughout the parish, except for properties greater than an acre in size in the rural and conservation districts. This would not apply to fences constructed of 3-wire, split rail, or other materials where water could actually pass through without obstructing or creating drainage issues, especially in those rural and conservation districts. Now, the idea is that we would establish a very simple same day or maybe 2-day fence permit review process. We are working on the permit form at this point. Staff is currently reviewing that. This would be a very minimal, if any, fee. The applicant would come in and get information from the staff to let them know what zoning district they're in. And then the applicant could simply draw on a map or on an aerial photograph where they are proposing to locate a fence, just so that the parish can ensure new fences are not placed in the drainage servitudes. The next big section to be updated was the preliminary plat section, part of the subdivision regulations. Some of this was just updating the language to mirror the current standard of practice. For example, the parish doesn't want hard copies of plats to be submitted when a new application is filed. Everything is being done electronically through the parish's system. So that was just an easy update to make while we were in there. Is it tied to growth management? Not so much, but it was hard to look past that once we got into the drafting. Now, a bigger change is when the 60-day shot clock starts for reviewing plats. We have been very clear in these revised provisions to say that once the application is deemed complete, that means staff has had the opportunity to review the submittal requirements. If that application is complete, then the 60-day approval clock per statute would begin. The director, rather, has 5 days to make that determination, whether or not the application is complete instead of the current 3 days. And then they would go through the standard review process for preliminary plats as they would today. Now, one thing that we added as part of this process is when the Planning Commission and when the Parish Council are reviewing preliminary plats, we have established new approval criteria. They're simple criteria, things like, is it consistent with the master plan and applicable planning documents? Is it consistent with proposed zoning of the property? Is it compatible with existing and planned land use patterns? Whether or not the proposed lots and blocks on that preliminary plat are consistent with adopted design standards. So in the absence of approval criteria today, decisions can just be made on an ad hoc basis. We are simply stating what those criteria are to give a little more guidance to both the Planning Commission and staff. Next section was a very minor change. You have a small section for large-scale development. It only applies to the Pelican Point project. So we added language to clarify that that section only applies to the Pelican Point project. We could discuss at another time whether or not additional sections or projects should be added to those standards. Next is the street requirements, section 174032, again, still in subdivision regulations, mostly revised for clarity and consistency. However, a big change here. We increased the minimum road width from 18 feet today to 20 feet in the future. This would allow for proper passing of vehicles without endangering pedestrians, bicyclists, people on skateboards, any way of traveling through and around a subdivision, just to give a little more breathing room for public safety purposes. We will probably have discussion tonight based on some initial feedback that we've received. Is 20 feet too much? Is that the right number? And so that will be part of the discussion this evening. But we certainly know that 18 feet is not wide enough in many cases, especially when two school buses are trying to pass, or a school bus is trying to pass a vehicle. It gets very, very tight, and that becomes a hazard. We've drafted a new access and connectivity section. So remember back in the summer and again in the fall when we talked about the future of managing growth in Ascension Parish, access and connectivity came up repeatedly. We heard a lot of things: access, connectivity, traffic, and drainage. That's the focus of both batch 1 and batch 2 amendments. This is a new section to try to start to get at some of those concerns. And it is a section that is found in most zoning codes, most modern zoning ordinances around the country, including some in Louisiana. Minimal standards for mobility to require them to just provide, additional access points, additional connectivity within and through new residential developments. The way we have drafted the standards today is that these would apply to new residential development or redevelopment of those existing subdivisions for any subdivision involving development on 20 lots or more, or any subdivision of land where at least half of the adjacent lands, 50% of the adjacent lands, are vacant or undeveloped, meaning that eventually they're going to be developed. So it's important to include some connectivity standards there. A summary of those standards, providing multiple access points for those subdivisions, Subdivisions with 50 or more lots shall provide at least 2 access points from existing roadways. Subdivisions with 100 or more lots have to provide 3 access points to and from those existing roadways. The Planning Commission, we did include a clause that would allow the Planning Commission to modify the standards, but only if the subdivisions lack off-street sidewalks, and as such, connection to that subdivision would result in conflicts between vehicles and pedestrians. Also could modify the standard if an existing subdivision lacks subsurface drainage. And because of that, connection to that subdivision might impede adequate flow of stormwater. So we've given a couple of instances where there's an escape valve to these new access and connectivity standards. But by and large, these new standards would become the norm and would apply to new subdivisions moving forward. So this is in response to a lot of the feedback that we heard from the parish. And I've just covered all of those things and realized I had an additional slide on that. So there are those standards that I just described. Next couple of sections are very small updates on servitudes. Currently, the parish includes a plat note that basically says, don't put things in the servitudes, things that could float away during a storm event, fences, walls, structures, plants, other types of debris. We took the plat note that is currently required on preliminary and final plats and just codified that directly into the land development regulations so that everybody would be playing by the same rules consistently. For block requirements, we added a consideration to the new connectivity standards when determining block length, widths, and shapes. So right now, this is a very short section of your code. It's merely, 3 or 4 sentences long. We added a sentence that just says compliance with connectivity standards when you're designing those the block requirements. Almost done. This is the last section, but it was a big change. Right now, the traffic impact analysis is drafted as an attachment to the subdivision regulations, and it was written more like a policy instead of actual requirements. So a lot of shuffling the deck to rewrite that, codify it, put things into list form to make this a standard regulation that applications would have to follow. So that was a big piece of the work. We also included a lot stronger language to serve as mandates. So instead of some of the requirements that are currently drafted as should be doing these things, we changed those to mandate language, shall be doing those things. We clarified the expectations of the parish and the development community in many ways. One is just giving specificity to what happens at what time. The applicant would sit down with the parish staff and discuss what the scoping of a traffic impact analysis would look like. At that meeting, the director and the parish's contracted traffic engineer, which I'll get into a little more detail on that in a moment, would sit down and discuss how much detail and information needs to be provided in the traffic impact analysis. So we have clarified that. We have gone down from 3 threshold types of TIAs to 2 threshold types because the only thing in the 3rd threshold was additional crash data, which is typically provided with the threshold 1 and threshold 2 studies anyhow. So we just simplified that standard. Now, a big change. With a new proposed subdivision, this would not be the developer hiring a traffic engineer to prepare a study for that proposed development. It would also not be the parish creating their own traffic study for that particular subdivision. Instead, the parish is going to put out a request for proposals so that traffic engineering firms in the region can apply to be the selected parish contractor who would then prepare. They're an unbiased third party hired by the parish so that as subdivisions are prepared, that hired contractor would serve to develop all of the traffic impact analyses moving forward. We think that's a fair way to approach new subdivisions, an unbiased way to meet all of the standards that are spelled out in the traffic impact policy. This is what's coming up in batch 2. So I've talked about what we'll cover tonight with the commission. Here's what you might expect in the next month. And these are all of the sections that we have edited as part of batch 2. And we got a draft over to staff in just yesterday, in fact. They're going to be reviewing the drainage requirements. What are the design criteria for drainage improvements in facilities within a subdivision? How does the placement of fill interface with new drainage improvements and new drainage facilities? We know that you did a lot of work in 2019 and even more recently on the drainage ordinance. There was just some clarification still out there that needed to happen, some discussion of proper design criteria and what storm events should we be designing to ensure that the parish is safe as you continue to grow and develop. So look for more. It'll be a meeting much like this coming up before the Planning Commission to walk through all of those proposed edits in batch 2. So that is it. I will circle back to one of the initial slides until it is time to discuss in greater detail with the commissioners. Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, we're going to open the public hearing. Stacy, you have any cards?
No, no cards.
No. Yeah. You can go ahead and come on up. I think since you're the only one speaking, we're going to give you a little extra time, so just go ahead.
Great. Thank you. I won't take too long. I appreciate it. Scott, here on behalf of the Home Builders Association, just a couple things. First, had a chance to visit with Mr. Fournier and Mr. Compton ahead of time, and we're certainly very eager to work with the parish to make this successful. We're very thankful for the certainly the robust efforts that have been put into this to date. Certainly a good bit to digest here, and so we just wanted to highlight 2 areas that I think we want to try to work with staff and the parish going forward on to make sure that there's sufficient clarity and that they work well. The first one is in the access and connectivity section 4032B. We do have some concerns that the thresholds set in C3 and 4. C3 is as it relates to the subdivisions with 50 or more lots, and then also in 100 more lots, and those have are tied to the different access points 2 and 3. I think we'd like to engage more about whether those are the right numbers and what the implications might be should that go forward. And secondly, C4 deals with the gated access generally not being counted toward minimum access and connectivity, and would like to kind of continue that conversation about potentially what we could do so there aren't unintended consequences on that one. The second section, certainly that is the most robust section, 4060, dealing with traffic impact analysis. Again, I think we understand the spirit of this and certainly feel like it's headed in the right direction. It is pretty robust. I did note in the as your consultant went through and highlighted, this is seeking to clarify expectations, right, and particularly of the development community. I think as some of our home builders and developers went through this, they felt like, you know what, we need a little more help making sure these expectations are clarified. Some of the language here might not be as clear as we would hope, and so I think meeting again with staff to understand where this is going would be very helpful, and we're eager to work with the parish to make this section work going forward. So that's the extent of my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. We don't have anybody else, so we'll close the public hearing. So fellow commissioners, let's just take up item 10.A1, section 17-2082B, fence requirements. Any comments, any discussions? I just have one question. The whole purpose of this is obviously to avoid fences and drainage servitude. So I'm good with an outright prohibition on that. But on the flip side of it, at where in the code, should we also say, if a developer drains the lots to the street, then there's no need for a rear servitude. And I see that all the plats consistently have drainage servitudes along the rear of the lots. And I just want to make sure that we're not requiring that drainage servitude, that if the drainage for that subdivision is to drain it all to the street, then we don't have to do that servitude, and it avoids the problem. Jerome, Tariq, any suggestions, any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have Eric address that from a planning perspective.
Okay.
And then follow up with Sean from an engineering perspective on how the subdivisions are designed. All right. Thank you.
The way the code currently reads is that rear swales are required in the rear subdivisions unless the rears of the lot is raised to shift the water to the street. And they require servitudes. Now, it has been our practice based on the problems and trying to make adjustments to these things kind of on the fly as we've been moving forward in these things, that it has been our policy over the last probably year and a half to require that if there is no off-site water coming into the rear of these lots, that those servitudes will remain private, and the only public servitudes would be for the piping that is coming from either catch basins or that's taking water from the road that's sending it to the required detention facility and out of the site. And what Tarek will probably say in a minute is that one of the items in batch number 2 does deal with swales and servitudes in the rear yards. So that change to that is also coming as well.
Awesome. I just want to make sure that, if a developer elects to plan and develop the subdivision in such a way that you don't need this drainage servitudes, he has that ability. That eliminates the problem with the fences. Because you have a 25-foot servitude and you have a fence on both sides. I don't know who's going to go back there and maintain that.
That's correct, yes. Yes.
So, all right. That's the only comment I have. Commissioners, do I have a comment? Do I have a motion? Oh, sorry. Commissioner Snyder.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for staff. How do we envision that this is actually going to be enforced? And that's just a general question I've kind of had. You were kind of almost relying on the honesty principle, or you have a bunch of people telling on each other. I mean, what is our plan for enforcement?
Well, currently, our subdivision inspectors are going out, and there are several subdivisions in the last year or so where we have basically had added notations to the map to prohibit fences in the servitude, and we've discussed that through the planning process. Mm-hmm. There are 2 or 3 subdivisions where my guys go in there quite regularly, and they basically, you can't put a fence in the servitude because it is prohibited to do that. Now, the biggest problems that we will probably have will be on individual lots and not necessarily within subdivisions, because obviously the subdivisions have big groupings of lots and everybody's concentrated there. But it'll be just like everything else. I mean, we will have people that will cause, just like the fill ordinance. Somebody sees a dump truck going into somebody's yard, we get a phone call. Mm-hmm. We have, the public is policing that, and we have building inspectors that are out running the roads all the time, and we address every one of them that come in, and that's basically the standard operating procedure as far as how we do that.
So if we have somebody who puts up a fence, it's not permitted, do we have a procedure in place for, is it a fine, is it just a notice, or are we just going to go tear down the darn fence?
There are fines associated with it, generally speaking, with regards to things such as fill, building violations, and things like that. Code enforcement gets involved. Mm-hmm. They will send a letter to them, and generally they will call, questions will be asked and answered, and then the problem can be addressed. But the parish does have the right to levy fines in the current ordinance as it exists now. Mm-hmm. To whatever degree, I guess we deem the infraction to be. Generally speaking, from my perspective, when I'm dealing with somebody, If there's a violation, they will be sent a letter laying out all the possibilities as far as fines and everything. And if they're willing to work with us and they show an effort and all of that, then typically we do not fine them. But it's always good to know that tool is available for us to use should the need arise.
I just have one more small question.
Okay.
And what is our plan for notification of this, of educating the public that we're dropping this on them?
That is something that the administration has been expressing, that we will do email blasts, we will do developers, engineers, things of that nature. We will publicize it on AP 21, we'll put it on the website, so it will definitely be publicized highly.
Yeah. Commissioner Shake Snyder, I'd like to add that we have identified maybe 4 or 5 actual fence installers in the parish, and there are others, obviously, but they do the bulk of the work here, and we plan to notify them. We'll have workshops with them if needed, all right? But we do plan to send out notifications of the new ordinance, all right? Secondly, I want to mention that one of the main focal points for the fence ordinance is for subdivisions. And as Councilmember Dumas mentioned earlier, it's because of the servitudes in the backyard, all right? So that's our main focal point with this fence ordinance, is to regulate fences within subdivision areas, all right? And when it comes to the fence heights that you see in the ordinance right now, we're very flexible on what we can do with fence heights. Front yards, backyards, it doesn't matter to us necessarily. One of the main concerns that we have is line of sight vision, especially at corners, things of this sort. We want to make sure that we maintain those for safety purposes. But I just want to throw that out there right now.
All right. Commissioner Bernardo.
I think he answered my question for the most part, but the height thing I was kind of hung up on, like my home, for instance. I bought a home 2 years ago, wasn't developed. A lady lived across the street, been there for 35 years, and we moved from probably here to that wall from her. And she wants to build a fence, and 4 foot just really wouldn't give her that privacy that she's wanting. So, I think we should certainly outline that to show the difference between the requirements with subdivisions and individual pieces of property under an acre or so.
Yeah.
Because, you build a fence, you want privacy. It's not always just for a dog to, keep clearance from other properties. You want to be able to spend your money to have that privacy if you can afford it, so.
Okay.
Commissioner Shea-San.
Yeah, just two quick comments. One, if the purpose of the ordinance is primarily a drainage issue in order to keep encumbrances out of the drainage servitude so that the you don't have obstructions, fencing, whatnot in the servitude. And to me, the portions of this addressing height and materials is maybe a little bit of overreach, I guess, if it doesn't really go with the stated purpose of why we're adopting it. But I do like the permit as long issue, because it does seem like a lot of the drainage issues we do have are people coming in, especially in subdivisions, not aware of the servitudes, put up the fencing, and it does block the drainage. So maybe at least requiring the permit allows us to catch those on the front end and prevent it from becoming a problem. But what is the cost of the permit? I'm afraid of getting involved in a situation where we start feeing people to death with a permit for this, permit for that, permit for the other thing.
We haven't established a fee yet, and we're researching as to what neighboring parishes might do. I will state that neighboring parishes, the fee is very minimal. We don't want to make it onerous on a property owner to get a permit, but we also want the permit. And one thing that we discovered in the past is that when we do not charge a fee for a permit, it seems like the permits seem to be worthless and people don't come in for them, all right? So we think there should be a value to it. We're not quite exactly sure what that's going to be yet. Right? So any fees that are for permits have to go to council and will have to be approved by council, all right? So we will take that to them, all right?
I would like to respond if I'm
sorry.
Hang on for a second. Commissioner Furman?
Yes, these these height and material recommendations, were they determined by researching surrounding parishes, or where did we get this, this
I'll let
recommendation here?
I'll let Tarek address that because he did some research
Okay.
on fences. Yeah.
Yes, so that's exactly why I wanted to chime in was, although it might seem that materials and height at this point are somewhat of an overreach due to the focus of trying to keep this about keeping fences out of the servitudes, we have also been hired in our contract to revise the entire ULDC over the next 18 months. And so while we're in there establishing new fence provisions, we thought it would be a good idea to get the fence permit as close to what we think it would be with the full code update now, so that you're not coming back 6 months from now or 9 months from now and saying, all right, now we're going to add more standards to those fence requirements, the new program we just started 2 or 3 months ago. So that was the intent. If we think it's an overreach, we can certainly pull them back out and readdress that later on through the full code update. Now, the materials for all of these updates, we did a lot of research around Louisiana, a lot of research around the country. Some parishes and many municipalities don't have fence requirements, and that's all the way across the country, including Louisiana. But we took a very minimal approach. There are certainly higher standards that you could address and fewer materials that you could allow. We thought this was a safe bet, given that you don't want a one-size-fits-all approach that addresses Donaldsonville, Santa Ma, Prairieville, and within Gonzales. There are lots of different things and levels of character going on, so we wanted to strike that balance.
Okay. On the height restrictions, I would think a developer would develop a subdivision, say, would want the height to be uniform throughout the whole development. Does this leave it open for individuals, let's say if the developer is not providing a fence, to one would have it an 8-foot fence on the side, another one would have a 4-foot. It says not to exceed. Right. It doesn't say a minimum. Should minimums be put in there also, or is it something we're going to police to make sure it's uniform?
Yeah, I think that's something we can address, Commissioner Furman. But I want to add, too, that we're not trying to impinge upon the HOAs that typically fall under the subdivisions, right? And you'll see HOAs have very particular standards when it comes to fences, all right?
And they'll override this.
So as Tarek mentioned, we're trying to establish some minimum requirements. They may go much stronger than what we have, and that would override our standards, obviously.
Okay. Right. One more thing. I don't see anything here about fencing around swimming pools. Do we have an ordinance in this parish to have swimming pools enclosed by a fence?
That would be a question for a building department, and I don't have the answer to that right now, but I can certainly find out.
Because that should be in here also if we do have that.
Well, I'll kick this over to Rick. I think as you're going through the ULDC, okay, at some point, and safety is a big concern here. Whether it's something that's associated with in the building department or in the building code or in the land development code, but I think the land development should consider pool enclosures and pool security somewhere. I don't know where the appropriate place is, but you might want to put that on your list of things to address, because I know several people who have swimming pools and there is absolutely no enclosure whatsoever to them, and children could just wander on that pool at any given time. So
we will make note of that, certainly.
Okay. With that, commissioners, do you have a motion or recommendation on this matter?
I move we approve.
I'd make the recommendation to not have a height requirement. HOAs take care of themselves. All HOAs, if you look through any kind of HOA, has very tight restrictions on those types of deals as far as fencing, the type of material. So putting a limitation maximum on a fence an individual can put up in his or her yard, I I just don't think that's something we should do. The servitudes and those types of things and the permit, you know, I think that's.
So do you want to make that in a form of a motion, exactly what you want to address?
The one concern I want to ask is, one of these things that they have is sight lines. So if somebody is on a corner lot, and if they have an 8 to 9, 10-foot fence, they could have potential sightline views obstructing around those corners. So at a certain point, we might need to have some of those things.
You also got servitudes on those corners as well. You typically got thicker servitudes on those corners too, so that gives you, you know, typical line of sight, but individuals, just limiting what individuals, I mean, I don't even think we're discussing, subdivisions here. Subdivisions is taking care of itself, so I would just take the height requirement off, you know, I would make a motion.
Let me paraphrase it for you, see if I understand what you're saying. So you would like to make a motion to send this to the parish council, eliminating paragraph D, height.
Yep.
In its entirety.
Yep.
Do it.
Can I make an alternative motion to strike items D 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that it would say D height, and then it would be 1, alternative height. Walls and fences should be minimum of 8 feet in height if they enclose refuse, service, or sewer treatment facilities, and then just eliminate the height requirements for front, side, rear, and corner lots. Is that okay?
Okay, so you seconding his amended motion? Okay, so we have a motion.
Well, we have a substitute motion, basically.
Right.
huh?
Well, the first motion never got a second. So you amended the motion essentially, right?
Yes.
So we've got a motion to recommend approval to the parish council for item number 1, 17-2082-B, fence requirements, which is a new section, eliminating paragraphs D1, 2, 3, and 4.
And remaining the rest of the
rest of it
section
remain as is.
as is.
Yes.
All in favor?
We have a second?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion by Commissioner Chason, second by Commissioner Bernardo.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
That was just on the amendment, right? So now we still have to vote
No,
to pass
that's-
the ordinance?
Well, as amended, as amended.
It replaces the
Yeah, as amended.
original motion.
Tariq, you got that? What we're saying?
I did, yes,
All right.
thank you.
Okay, next one is item 10A.2, section 1745, preliminary plat procedure. Commissioners, anybody got? I'm going to start, if it's okay. I mean, I have a problem with item L 4, 5, and 6. They're too arbitrary. I mean, I think item 5 is easy to fix, where the proposed lots and blocks are consistent with adopted design standards as included in table C. Is that correct, Jerome, of the code? I think you got to reference that provision of the code, wherever the table, or whatever the table is. And I think 4 and 6, I just think we need a standard. We need something that's a standard. I mean, I like the latitude, but that wouldn't, I don't think there'd be a fair code if it were that broad. You know, whether a right-of-way servitudes are adequate to serve the property are consistent. I think here we're talking about 20 feet, that's a safety standard. And if that's a safety standard, then by golly, 20 feet should be, it should be it. I mean, I think that we just need to have measurable standards there, that something that we can hang our hat on. It's just, this is it. And the number is I don't have a magic wand. I don't know what the number is.
So you have a problem with 4, 5, and 6?
Right. Well, 5 is easy to fix. I think if that paragraph references the appropriate table that's got the those design standards in the code, then I'm good with that because it ties it back to that provision of the code.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Sure.
Could I have everybody speak into the microphone clearly because our consultants connected
I'm sorry,
hardwired
Terry, could
and
you
is
hear
having
me?
a difficult time of hearing some things. So thank you very much.
Okay,
I can hear you. I only missed one speaker so far.
okay. All right, so commissioners, any other comment?
Just so maybe I'll make sure I'm understanding, because as I read this, I think this is only outlines the procedure for submitting the preliminary plat. And so the 4, 5, and 6, while in this, and I agree, I mean, if there's a specific table for 5, then definitely reference it. That's cleans it up. But as I'm understanding it, I think the 4 and 6 basically is just setting forth general. These are the criterias that are to be looked at when looking at a preliminary plat, and then the specifics are what's contained in the following sections of the code. So you look at so yes, we have to look at whether there's sufficient servitudes, and then you look through the code to see what those are. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it, I don't know, and Tariq can explain that to us, but yeah, I do agree we need to try to eliminate as much of the vagueness and discretion from the commission standpoint, but I don't even think this particular article applies to the commission. It's just the procedure for submitting the plat. Is that right? Or am I misinterpreting it?
No, I'd like to clarify if I could here. So this is a foray into what you will see with all new procedures when we get into the full code update. This section describes the procedure for how plats are submitted, how they are reviewed both by staff and the public, and the Planning Commission, how they are ultimately approved. So what is lacking in the current section 405 is any sort of approval criteria. We know the standards exist for how the engineers shall design a new subdivision. That is different from approval criteria, which are during a public meeting or any review process. What factors or considerations are you as a decision-making body using to make your decision? Now, staff will do a good job up until that public meeting of saying they either meet the standard of the design criteria or not, but you in making your decision are now going on record saying, in consideration of all of these approval criteria, we approve the proposed preliminary plat. So they're not the standards themselves, and they are not just submittal requirements.
Correct. Okay, so if I may, that's exactly my take on it, is that this is the criteria that we would apply when we're reviewing a plat at a hearing.
Okay.
Okay, and to me, they're a bit too undefined, too broad. Now, with that, if I may, Commissioner Shake Snyder has got some questions or comments.
Thank you. I do have a few things, and I'll just kind of go down the line. This would be in the main section, Section E. One of the things that it says is that the chairman of the Planning Commission may act on behalf of the Planning Commission in the consideration of a simple subdivision, et cetera. One of those things I wanted to know is there a way that we can add some language that the Planning Commissioner, chairman, or even administration can give us notice about those changes if they do happen? If we have a chairman, they do act on our behalf, we should invariably know about it in some manner. Is that something that we could have documented?
Commissioner Shake Snyder, the purpose of this is small administerial type of actions. You know, it's not to go before the Planning Commission with large changes to the plat, and those are currently outlined in the subdivision code. And so any small change, whether it's wording on a plat or the movement of a line that was incorrectly placed there to begin with, you know, we don't want to go back to the Planning Commission and eat up your time to correct those type of things. And so these are typically small administerial actions that occur.
Okay.
You know, So, just to clarify that.
Well, and it's more of,
Chairman can do that.
yeah, just as something as simple, like when we have the chairman's comments, or if, we have comments from the ERA or anything like that.
Right.
By the way, we had some small changes, this was happened.
Yeah, and Eric can kind of expand on it a little bit because he takes care of these on a daily basis.
Okay.
Basically, this is a section of the code that allows the planning commission chairman to sign simple divisions and family petitions after the family petition has had the public hearing. And, well, actually, it's for simple divisions only, that doesn't require a public hearing. Those are reviewed by staff, as Jerome said. Those are staff level reviews and they don't require a public hearing, and it simply allows the chairman to sign those.
Okay.
And this is an existing part of the code as it is now. We're
Yes,
not making changes to
correct.
this.
That's right.
Okay.
That happens now.
That happens now.
And then my next comment was, it would be under Part 2, Section 4, Part A, a change in the lot, the change in the size of the lots amounting to an increase of 10% or more to the total number of lots from previously approved plat. I understand that we have that in effect right now, that 10% change. Is there a possibility that we could have some type of threshold? And my example would be, if we have a subdivision, a very large subdivision of 500 units, a 10% can be the plus or minus of 50. That is something that's still fairly significant. Can we have something like a range of, if we go 50 to 100 lots, it's 10%. If it's 100 to 200 lots, it's 5% or something like that. Can we have something maybe a little bit more structured as this thing scales up? Is that something that we would look at?
That's a possibility. If you'd like to make that recommendation, we'd certainly consider that.
Okay. Tariq, do you have any suggestions? Have you seen anything like that in other codes?
Yes, and absolutely. And we didn't make that a huge focus of this first batch of amendments, but I'm happy to do it as part of this. What I would suggest, and what is more common, is just placing a cap on the total change, the total number of lots that might change. So you could say amounting to an increase of 10% or more of the total number of lots from the previously approved plat up to 50 additional lots, or whatever you want that number to be. That is the common approach, rather than providing a spectrum of ranges.
Okay.
That would be different percentages.
Okay. My next question is, if we go on further down, it would be Section J1. One of the things that I've always had an issue with, we do not substantially define construction starting methods or anything like that.
Yes.
I want to see something, I'm requesting that we have something official in here that is defining that construction has taken place.
We added that about a year and a half ago.
Okay, okay. Well, and I know we have, but I didn't see it on here, so.
No, it's in the definitions.
Okay.
It's currently
Perfect.
in the definitions.
Next is, and I'm sorry, I had quite a few things, is in Section 2 of that one. We were talking about if no permits are requested or utilized prior to the expiration date for a respective filing. One of these other terms I want to make sure of that we have in here is also filing and phasing. We have had some subdivisions that try to use those terms synonymously yet differently. I want to either correct that moving forward or make sure we're putting phases in there as well so we don't have any confusion.
Yes, I mean, I agree, because there are filings and then there can be phases of filings.
Mhm.
So, yes, and we attempt very stringently to make sure that they list them as filings.
Okay, okay. Almost done the last few things. I do agree with Commissioner Dumas about Section 4 of L, Part 4. I think it's a little too vague. I'd like to see something a little bit more, concise about this. But one of my questions is that it says about extraordinary service delivery costs, public facilities. Are we considering schools in this as a public facility? Okay, I see you shaking.
Yeah, I think you could easily make that argument. I just want to make a broader comment here. These approval criteria are drafted with the intent of being more vague. These are not the standards themselves. These are when you're sitting at the dais making a decision on a subdivision, you're reviewing these and thinking, all right, it's obvious to us as a commission that there's a lack of adequate public facilities. You can't place a number on that, right? Because it's going to differ case by case by case, whether or not you can serve that property. So we would not draft approval criteria to have numeric standards in there typically.
Okay.
That would be fairly unusual.
And I can understand that.
I can agree with you with that.
Yeah, but one of the things that we're technically, the way it's written and from what I understand, we're not allowed to consider schools currently. And so that's one of those things. We don't have a basis for school overcrowding. We don't get that type of data. We don't get any input from the school systems. So then it becomes a little too arbitrary. And that's something that if we can have input from the school systems or have some type of basis on that, then that allows us to make these proper considerations.
If I may, I'd like to ask legal, if I'm not mistaken, I think that schools, since they're, I guess, a different political entity, they're separate from the parish, so we really can't take that into account.
No, I don't believe so. I don't see why we couldn't ask the school board maybe
Right.
to see if they would, be willing to work with us on this.
They can participate if they choose, but we can't
Correct.
require.
We can't make them, but we can definitely ask for their consent.
And that's it for right now.
Well, I think you've addressed my concerns, okay? So, Tariq, I'm good with your explanation of this approval criteria. We do need to have some latitude, that is correct. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to have latitude. We may choose to impose a condition of approval to improve the road so that it could have meet that criteria. So.
All right, so I'm going to make a motion to amend this.
Okay.
To amend, not to approve, I'm just an amendment for right now, because I know other people had some proposed amendments as well. So to amend 17405, section F4A, to delete that period, and then after plat, to insert up to 15 lots, period.
You want to
Where are
limit
you?
it
I'm
at
sorry,
15?
take me to where you are.
4A, so here.
Okay.
So it would say a change in the size of lots amounting to an increase of 10% or more of the total number of lots from the previously approved plat up to 15 lots.
Is 15 enough, or I think that's...
I know y'all threw out 50 earlier. My concern is 50 is bigger than some subdivisions, and what's it going to do to the traffic impact, right? So if we're going to allow a 10% increase, I think we need to cap it, and that's something where we wouldn't say, hey, if you'd have done another traffic study with that in there, it would have failed. Like, I don't want to make the number so big that it allows an end around the traffic policy.
Just a question, at what point do we require a revised traffic analysis if you're going to amend your previously provided plat?
Right now, the current threshold, it's weighted, it's a 1-to-1 ratio in subdivision, so it's 39 lots. So if what Jocelyn was saying is someone came in at 39, did a plan revision, increased by 10%, 40 lots, got 4 more, they skipped the original traffic study. And they use that as a way to bypass looking at nearby intersections.
So that could be 4 lots, as few as 4 lots could do that.
Yes.
Well, maybe it
From
needs to be
39 to 44. So there's a lot of things to think about here. Y'all are right on that. So there should be some language. It's not in things to consider. One would be, does that warrant a revised traffic analysis by whoever does the traffic study? It requires a new threshold. If that's the case, it should probably go back into a full public body to discuss those things. So it's a good thing that Wade brought up, it's like 50 can be nothing for one, but could be huge for, that could be a difference, a whole different study, or that one trigger that drops the level of service.
Right.
So, so it's things to consider should be, one, there's a threshold with the understanding that per staff, it does not do this. When compared to the original, would it alter a new revised traffic study through current requirements or new drainage requirements or whatever those things are? And it really should be, it's relative to the original, not previous, because you can keep rolling this 10% rule over 10, 20 years and just, it's all relative. It's like what we do with simple division lots around here. It's always the previous thing and you just keep rolling and rolling it. So the topic makes sense of the plan revisions. There's just, which I believe a part of this was talk about the main topics, but then get into the details of each of these and make sure we close in the gaps. So I would, the 10% rule makes sense. It's a standard practice, but there needs to be a couple of things to be consistent with the theme of our emphasis in this parish on traffic studies and how sensitive it is to use one mechanism to skip a traffic threshold study.
Okay.
That's important to us, so there should be a cap.
I like where you're going with this. So it sounds to me like what we need is we need one more item here, and the item is that they don't trigger a traffic study threshold.
Yes.
But-
Well, it's not just traffic, it could be
Could be
drainage as
drainage.
well.
Well, the drainage is already referenced in it already.
Okay.
So I mean, we've got drainage, we've got the green space, we've got the sewer, changing the street pattern overall layout, then we have a 10%. But I think that, I hear you loud and clear, but 10% of a subdivision could dramatically change the traffic study. I know that Ricky Compton has a comment from the president's chair, so.
But that's not exactly accurate.
If we could give Mr. Compton an opportunity to address this.
Thank you. So I just want to point out that the major subdivision guidelines lay out the number of lots that are allowed by size within a subdivision. Generally speaking, most or the majority of the developments that you've seen maximize the smallest lot size because they're trying to get to their 3 units an acre. The only way to increase their lot count is to reduce their lot size. So the argument thinking that any development is going to be able to get 20, 30, 40, 50 more lots by reducing their lot size, it's not valid anyway because they've already maxed out the smallest number. Where this happens is when they get in and start designing and engineering and they move a lot line because they've got to add a drainage servitude to get to a pond and maybe they've added one lot because of that. They've changed 270s, which is 140-foot frontage, to 260s and a 50, whatever that number is. You're never going to get this drastic increase in lot sizes. It doesn't happen. Nobody designs a subdivision with that much fluff that they can reduce their lot size and gain lots. It just doesn't exist. So you're solving a problem that doesn't exist. It can't happen.
Okay.
Yeah, the only way I've seen this happen, what Ricky was talking about, is when you get in final design and you realize the pond size that you need at the preliminary level, you have enough information, the footprint can be smaller because you found more depth. You can find more lots. I think this happened at Pelican Crossing when they found out they're able to lower the base foot elevation, which required floodplain mitigation, the footprint to be smaller because they had a deeper, lower footprint. That subdivision, now make up for that space, could have, I don't think they did, could have added more lots. But, that's a very rare situation that happens. Because ideally, you want to go in front of the planning commission with the most that you can get approved. And if the designer was working, back off from that.
Okay.
That particular subdivision that Sean mentioned, though, did go back to the planning commission for consideration, as I recall.
It was a very rare,
Yeah.
it was a rare, it had to get a low mark to even make that happen.
I mean, you could almost even if you have a subdivision, if you want to set a total at 15, say for instance, and say you can go 10% up to 15, require them initially, if you've got somebody that's got a 100-lot subdivision and they can increase 10%, you require their traffic study to show what would happen if they had 110 lots. And if something happens that you're at a certain threshold, you put a condition on it at the preliminary plat approval that says that because your threshold, if you increase the number of lots, would go beyond X, you would not be able to do this change without coming back to the planning commission.
Commissioner Chason?
I guess I've got the motion to say up to 15 lots. If somebody wants to second it, if not, if somebody wants to substitute.
I do agree with what Mr.
I
Compton is saying.
I do think there needs to still be a cap, though. I mean, if it's a certain situation like Ricky's saying, where you're really only ever going to get 1 or 2 lots, having a 15-lot cap wouldn't matter because nobody's ever going to, it's never going to get that point anyway. To me, like, and Wade, you were the one who brought this up, I do like the idea of there being some cap where before it's, where it's like, okay, if it's over a certain number, it's got to come back to the commission just because, like you said, some weird case where somebody could get 50. So put a number.
You want to put 10?
I mean, that's fine. I mean, lower is fine. You can make it 3 for all I care. I think there needs to be a cap to where if it's over a certain amount, it has to come back to the commission.
So,
what that is.
So is your motion to approve?
Well, the motion was just, yeah.
No, just to amend the same. Tariq, go ahead, please. Oh.
Hold on. Yeah, sorry, this is Tarek. The way this is drafted today in your current code, all of the changes made by the owner have to go back before the planning commission chairman, unless they meet A through E below. So I just wanted to make that clarifying point that if we add up to 15, it's still going to have to go to the planning commission for review, regardless.
Okay. Oh, well, that's fine.
Okay. All right.
Wade was the one who mentioned the cap, so I was just trying to amend to include the language. Well, then don't second the motion.
Okay. Motion dies for lack of a second.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments? Go ahead.
One other question I had is, and this is also in L, for approval criteria, we have part 1, consistency with the master plan and other applicable planning documents. Currently, we are not codifying our master plans. It is since it's not a codified document, can we still use that as one of those rules in that sense, or should we put some type of teeth behind this and make sure that we have to codify those plans?
No, I think the master plan is governed by statutes, and I think that the fact that the code has referenced it here actually gives it teeth.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? Do I have a motion?
And I make a motion to recommend approval to the council.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Chason and a second by Commissioner Furman to recommend that the parish council adopt this ordinance. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next one, large-scale development. Go ahead, Tariq. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something that I noticed when we added paragraph A to section 174021, it makes that suggested cross-reference to subsection B below irrelevant. So because we added line A, line B, the first sentence there should say, unless accepted in this paragraph, the standards and requirements of these regulations may be modified.
Okay. Legal, do we need to take any, we're okay? We're good. All right. All right, next item.
All right. Well, so we'd have to vote on that, right? So I'll make a motion to amend 174021B to say unless accepted in this paragraph, the standards and requirements, and then approve it as amended.
Second.
Second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now, that's good. We're good to go.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I combined them into one.
You got the maker of the motion in the second, Stacy? You got the maker of the motion in the second?
I'm gonna have to listen to it.
Okay, was Commissioner Chason made the motion? Shake Snyder seconded. Okay. All right, next item. Section 17, 4032, street requirements.
We got large scale development.
Oh, large-scale development, my bad.
No, that's what we just did.
That's the one that we just did, yeah.
Oh, I apologize.
Come on, Wade. Section 17, 4032, street requirements. Okay, this is good. We're getting a lot done. Any comments? I'll start. A2, any division of property of 8 or less of the parent tract is exempt from this division. I need to make sure that Mr. Boshe and I are clear, that is the parent tract. Okay?
Yes.
Okay,
From,
the parent tract.
yes. But how do you define the parent tract?
The parent tract was the original parcel of land. It's as simple as that. It's that simple.
But I mean,
You have to define the starting dates. You
Yeah.
gotta go 1979, 1995, as it is today. That is the current, you can't go retro back. You gotta
When did
define-
Adam and Eve happen?
What's that?
Give me a date.
That's yours. I got enough things to challenge up here. I'm not gonna do that.
Tariq, we need a date.
I'll stay in my lane on this one.
I tell you what, I tell you a date I like. Zoning was first adopted in Ascension Parish when?
99.
But what, wasn't it like May, June? Huh?
Our zoning official here
Yes,
is-
it was adopted in 98, and it went into effect June 1st of 99.
Okay. As of June 1st, 1999, that's a legitimate date.
Mhm.
We need this to reference that date as a parent tract as identified as of June 1st, 1999.
I guess. So would that be better stated as a definition in the definition section? In other words, just define parent tract is, and then put the definition, parent tract, and then define it that way? I don't know, I'm just thinking like from a structural standpoint, if it's, because really all, and it's a good point, because it needs to be defined what you mean by that. I don't know if it'd be better to come up with the definition and then include it in the definition sections, or to include it as a subsection here, and I guess that, you're the expert, you would have the better understanding on how to do that.
Tarek, how do you?
Yeah, I like the suggestion of including it in the definitions. This is your current language, so I didn't revise it. I would also say that you don't define it today, so I think you should if you're going to use that term, parent tract.
Well, actually, it presents a very serious problem, so absolutely, we need to define it, okay?
I'm wondering if the date of zoning is the best choice here, and I'm just kind of brainstorming out loud. Zoning and subdivision of property are two very different acts of land development, and you might want to tie it to the date of initial subdivision.
Mr. President, Ricky Compton, please.
So just real quick, back in 2015, when we amended the family partition regulations, we set a parent tract date of January 1st, 2015. And we have a saved document that identifies the parent tracts, because we identified that at that point was where we were going to start counting lots and divisions of property. And if you wanted to use a date, I would use that date, because we've already established it in the subdivision code.
Well, if it's established here, then forget it, then the problem's resolved.
Well, but it's not defined anywhere. It's only for use as now. If you look at the family partition section, that's the requirement so as of now, it's only defined for purposes of family partition, as opposed to putting it in the definition section where it would apply anywhere the term of our parent tract is used throughout the code. So you're dead on, it needs to be defined, but I don't think what Ricky's saying, I think it's good to use the same map and the same date, but you still have to include it somewhere in the code, whether it's definitions or subsection here.
No, I think it needs to be in the definition. So a good piece for you to take back is a definition that you need to add to that as you get to that section of the code. Okay?
Got it.
All right. Any commissioners, any other comments? Commissioner Schick-Snyder.
I know what everybody really wants to talk about is the 20-foot pavement. So I've got a lot of questions about that. Number one, what is our reasoning behind it? I mean, we have a very brief reasoning, but can we get a list of, why we're doing this? What benefits does 20 feet versus 18 feet truly give us? Is it a capacity issue? Is it just a purely safety issue? Can we get some of those requirements laid out?
I'll begin. I think the primary focus of this was a safety issue. Cars going past each other on roads, pickup trucks. I know we've had some people in this room who've had incidents, recently with mirrors and things of this sort along passing. School buses, obviously, it's an issue. So that is one side of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I'll defer to Ricky because he actually did a detailed analysis out there with drone footage and things of this sort. So I'll let him kind of explain a little bit more about what he found.
One of the things I'd like for you to put up is you have a map that shows all the streets in Ascension Parish that don't meet the 20 feet, right?
I do have a map.
And I think you should.
Can we have Ricky
Yeah,
talk about it
please,
first,
yeah.
and then I'll display the map?
So I'd like to welcome Councilman Chase Melanson to the meeting. We did this when he was serving on the Strategic Planning Committee, and we got with the school board and took some buses out and measured them physically with two buses passing side by side. And from the outside wheel well to outside wheel well of two buses passing, 18 feet was not enough room to safely pass. Plain and simple. There was no magic tape measures and nothing of that nature. It just isn't safe. We asked TARC to look at what other communities have used, what is considered best practices, and 20 foot was the answer.
Okay, I know I'm with you. I mean, it cost me $3,000 to fix the mirror on my truck when an oncoming Mickey Mouse truck, as I call them, took out the driver's mirror. So
I want a definition of Mickey Mouse truck.
the ones that have the mirrors way out like this.
We'll put that in the definition.
Yeah.
But my next question is it a sense of 20 feet of pavement? Is that what we really need to be looking at? Or should we potentially be looking at something a little bit more defined as travel lane sizes? And that's one of the things that I'm looking more forward to is are two essentially 9-foot travel lanes. While that might be 18 feet, you might have closer to true 20 feet of pavement. But those travel lanes are truly designated properly with striping and safety, guidances on that. Is that something that is considered in that 20 feet?
Yes, and that's an excellent point. So this is not the design specifications for subdivisions and building streets. It doesn't get into the depth of the asphalt or any of the striping of the lanes, but that you're right on. This is just pavement width. 20 feet pavement width allows you to have even an 8.5-foot lane if you needed to. That would be a lot safer than trying to shoehorn everything into the current 18 feet of pavement that you have today. So how you end up striping that to just increase safety and designating those lanes, that should lie within the subdivision design specifications.
Correct.
Not in this section of the code, but that's exactly what we were thinking.
And then my next question is that do we have some type of cost mechanism that is an idea? This is going to cost a lot of money. And what do we do for existing roads that don't meet this standard right now that people may want to build on? And what cost mechanisms do we have to improve these roads? Do we have any type of studies for this?
Well, I'm going to chime in on that, Commissioner Chase, Chase, if you don't mind. Since we have, Councilman here, there's a serious economic impact here. I think if we put the map up, we'll understand how many roads here don't meet 20 feet. It's a significant number of roads. And we can kid ourselves. The reality is we don't have public dollars to fix it. That's reality number one. So reality number two is we got to find a way to encourage developers to take on that responsibility. And the only way to take on that responsibility is if we can take the traffic impact ordinance and, it's the economy of trips rather than the economy of roads. It's the economy of trips, A developer widens the road, it's increased the capacity of that road. And maybe he now retains those trips. And as we administer other developments that occur off of that road, he can recapture some of those funds through a trips exchange with the parish. But somehow or another, we got to get creative how to finance this. The council has been very brave and twice proposed, special taxes, but the residents said no. So maybe we need to be creative and follow. This is done in other parts of the country, where the economy of trips, even the economy of water capacity, it's something that is now in the market, and that's how roads get widened and improved by developers, because they can get remunerated as development takes place, because once you improve the road, it's going to attract more development, right? But the capacity of the road, it now becomes the economy by which they use to fund the road.
Well,
just some thoughts.
And my main concern is that, if we are going to make these new changes, which we all agree probably should be done, we also need to have a plan for funding existing roads that don't meet this requirement one way or the other. And if we don't have that plan, we need to have some type of mechanism that if somebody can do it, how they can, monetize this properly. I'm also looking at, we don't want to make sure that we're taking too many pieces of land out of commerce. And I think that is a valid thing that we are teetering on.
If I could get John in the booth out there to kind of change over to the screen to my computer. I'm sitting and I'm plugged in. You should be able to do that. The map that I have displayed here, that's my home screen, so.
Where's that located at in Ascension Parish?
That's my backyard.
I'm glad we have technical assistance here.
I do want to talk about you. I'm on mic active, so I can't. You can leave it active if you want.
No, it's fine.
So for instance, if we say this is 20 feet, and Germany is 18, and they have no method of plans or anything to do 20 in Germany. It takes everything off of Germany out of commerce.
No, that's
unless a developer comes in and extends it. Well, if one developer does it, then what happens to that second person? He gets all the benefits without having to do anything. That's not fair.
There we go. I'd like to compliment our IT people here that actually work wonders. So the map in front of you right now displays all the roads that are in blue are less than 20 feet in width, right? So all of the roads that you see are less than 20 feet in width, right? I would like to also add to the commentary tonight that we recently had a subdivision within the last year that was approved off of a road that was substandard size to current standards. It was less than 18 feet in width. And we worked with the developer. They're improving and widening that road to 20 feet in width, all the way from two major intersections. It's almost a mile in length. What we did was work with that developer, place that particular road in the transportation impact fee program. We're giving them credit on their transportation impact fees for the improvement of that road, for all the impact fees that would be generated by that one subdivision, right? So that is one way that improvements are made in other parts of the country. We have tried to utilize that here. We'd like to work with more developers in trying to implement a program like that, but it's a two-sided equation, because we are giving them the ability to move forward with the development, okay? But they're also participating in the improvement of one of the major roads in the parish, right? So.
Yeah, I think, just kind of to that point, I think the financing issue is maybe a bit outside of our purview as the Planning Commission, especially tonight. But I think we all agree 18 feet's not safe, and it's a safety issue. I mean, I would note Jefferson Parish, which is, certainly not having any, is booming like we are, 26 feet. St. Tammany, which is booming like we are, 20 feet. St. Landry Parish, 60 feet. So I think, 20 is probably the minimum. I think Tarrant could have probably.
I want to make sure no one gets too lost in that. 60 foot,
well, 60-foot width
I'm not
ditches or
convinced.
50
It's more
at
of
curb
right
and
away.
gutter.
That's more to me. I just looked at this. 60 foot's more of a right away. I can't imagine anyone imagine 60 foot of pavement. There's when people say roads, it's 60 foot interchange right of way versus the actual physical road.
Right.
You're right on 20 foot makes sense, but I just don't want us to get too up. Maybe part of this revisions that the public, if they were to grab this and thinking, why don't we just go to 60?
Well,
It's not. Because that's not an accurate comparison. It's not apples to apples.
Okay, yeah, and I was just going by what was included in here, but my point being, I think they could have gone with something higher, but went with this lowest, what I think we would all agree to be safe amount. And I think that the trade-off is like Jerome said, and we saw it with the development off Cannon, right? Which is what I think he was referring to. If they wanted to develop, but the road didn't meet the proper standards, so they agreed to widen the road so they could develop, and that fixes the safety issue, allows him to move forward, and then fixes the road issue. And the parish, and I see Councilman Wausau out here, and I'm sure they're probably going to work on coming up with some of these other things, but I think our standpoint is just, what are we going to pass out for the council to look at as far as the safety, what that minimum road width should be, and you fix the two problems, or really the main problem that we had, which is there was never any mechanism for determine how you measure the road, right? The whole, what does 18 feet mean? And so you fix that problem in here by specifying exactly how you're going to measure the road and for what length you're going to measure the road. And so that, I'm really good to see that you've resolved that issue. So I'm fine with this as it is. And then I think whatever funding mechanisms y'all are talking about, I think probably needs to be handled, in my opinion, needs to be handled at the council level, not Planning Commission. I don't think that's us. I don't even think that would fit proper for the development code.
I wasn't proposing that we handle that. I'm just proposing that the council should consider those kinds of things as an alternative to find a source of funds to do that. Councilman, please come to the. Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank y'all for having me. I know this isn't appropriate, so thank you for letting me speak. I did just want to just reference, and I don't know if this is going to be clear, but this, look, in June of 2020, when Mr. Compton and I, so this is a fire truck and a school bus. This is 18 foot outside the tire, and this is where we placed them. As you can tell, those mirrors are, overlapped. 6 to 8 inches. And I gotta look, this is what that looks like here. And this is what 20 foot looks like outside the tire to outside the tire. So this is at Galvez Primary School. We utilize a driveway. Henderson Bayou Road is actually about 22 foot wide outside the stripes, but we went with the 20 foot. listen, I talked to Commissioner Shakespeare yesterday. You know, he had an idea, you know, 9-foot lanes, you know, as long as you have 9 foot between your stripes. I mean, it doesn't have to be 20 foot. Whatever the number is to where a school bus, emergency vehicles, and whatnot can safely pass each other without, you know, one of them having to hit the shoulder. You know, the summer of 2020, I had, I think it was 13 or 14 bus drivers. Like, I had people lining up to, you know, to shoot these pictures. And, you know, it's a safety concern that we get a lot. Mr. Chad with the school board, you know, he said they spend thousands of dollars a year on repairing school bus mirrors strictly for this, you know, this reason right here. So,
I can imagine.
Huh?
I can imagine.
Yeah. They stay busy with that. So it is a safety issue. I will piggyback what Mr. Jerome said. He kind of stole my thunder. You know, just within the last year, we had I believe 103 lots, Mr. Jerome, is Windermere? 103 lot subdivision. You know, so they roughly would have paid about $250,000 in impact fees. They've voluntarily ponied up the other $750 and are improving, which I would argue the most unsafest stretch of road that we have in Ascension Parish. Cannon Road from Roddy Road to 44. I mean, they didn't blink at it. You know, the one request they did have was, of course, to eliminate the second entrance and the wetlands because there was so much mitigation. But, you know, when we talk about smart development, in my opinion, that's what it is. You know, you can't say yes to everything. You can't say no to everything. But I believe the development community, you know, has more than enough funds to help improve. You know, it's not just they're building houses, selling them, and moving on. The whole purpose is for them to help improve the community, make it better for the people that are here, that are existing. And within the last year, we have proven that there's money there for them to contribute to the stress that they put on our infrastructure. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I think this is a very big topic. I'm not, you know, 100% set on the 20 foot, but I would like some, you know, 8.5, 9 foot travel lanes inside the stripe, you know. And look, I tell you, the road specifications we have inside of development, I think are, you know, curb and gutter. You got 26 foot of concrete, and for example, Hidden Lakes is upcoming. And then at the end of Stevens Road, what's that development at the end of Stevens Road? Like 30, 35 houses. They're on, you know, 3/4 to 2 or 3 acre lots, you know, where they have the small open ditches in the front. They got a 20-foot asphalt road, that's private, that, you know, that their RIDD pays for. But they had these little swells. There's no sewer in the swells and all that stuff. And he was able to make larger lots. He didn't have to sell as many lots because he didn't have to spend $1 million putting down a road that was curb and gutter. I think if we show some leniency on curb and gutter roads inside of the neighborhoods, they can help us improve them outside the neighborhood. So I think there's a bunch of ways to work around this to where, you know, home builders and developers don't, you know, go out of business. We don't need that. I have 3 young kids. They're going to need a place to live one day, and it's going to be here in Ascension. But we have to do it a little, you know, wiser than we have for the last 25 years. And I don't think the economic impact is as dire as some of us, you know, may think it is. There's ways that we can work together and improve it, and they can help pay for it. Sure. So I do appreciate the time at the podium. I know I've been at the middle school track meet at Donaldsonville since 3 o'clock, so I appreciate the time. And Ms. Tarek, look, Brandon Note, what can he do, huh? He's got people here, he's got people there. He's unbelievable. So that's it. Thank y'all. I appreciate it.
You know, one comment I want to add to your pictures. Those buses have stopped.
Yeah, right.
They're going 30 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You know, that line of sight gets a little hairy. Okay? So.
Look, I was born and raised on Highway 621, almost parallel to Stevens Park. So we used to ride our bikes down George Reed Road and get on Cannon Road to go to Stevens Park for practice. And you talking about a suicide mission, you know? I mean, but we were teenagers. We were too dumb to care. But yeah. So,
I remember those years. They were a long time ago.
I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just a few things. Look, I am enjoying y'all's comments and input and all that stuff. So if y'all could. I might be asking a lot, but you know, the specific ideas you have on this, maybe if y'all want to jot that down individually and send that to the council. So whenever this comes to the council, look, I mean, not everybody has time to attend and watch every meeting.
No.
You know, that way we can kind of have an idea of different ideas. So I appreciate it. Thank y'all.
You got it. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Chairman.
All right, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yes.
sorry, I didn't have my microphone. I'd like to add that part of the contract with Kindig Keese is that they have a financial consultant on board, Tischler Advice. They're a nationally recognized firm. They're going to be looking at financing, different techniques of financing infrastructure, things of this sort. That's not part of this package, obviously, but
No,
it will be coming to the council and the commission at a later date to look at some financing techniques for infrastructure. All right, so I just wanted to be that, let you know that, and it could be a number of different things: assessment districts. It could be development impact fees. It could be a number of different ways of raising money to fund infrastructure for improvements to the parish. All right.
Excellent.
All right.
Good to hear.
I just had one item to help.
Go ahead, please.
I've heard, at some of these public settings, I've heard some, I guess, not correct information. You might hear someone say, why are we saying 20-foot roads is acceptable to get to a subdivision? In subdivision, we require 27-foot back a curb. You think about it, you'd probably want the larger road and then go to some smaller subdivision. Subdivision roads are designed that way because the way people lead them, it accommodates parking. You know, parking's not allowed in public. If you think about 27, 9 foot on one side, 9 on the other. If you've been in those subdivisions, you can squeeze through the middle. The whole thing's not shut down when people have to put their cars in their front or have people over. So subdivision streets, 27 foot, it is allowing for parking on the street. That's why those are required to be bigger than the 20 foot or whether numbers we get into leading up to the subdivision. And that's why DOTD doesn't require 27-foot roads. They're not allowing parking on the road going 45, 50, 35 miles an hour.
All right, yes, go ahead.
So, kind of like and I did have a conversation with Councilman Lawson. One of my ideas is that, and his picture actually kind of showed it. They had 2 school buses. Yes, the pavement was 20 feet in length. It was almost 22 outside the safety lines, and that picture did dictate in-cap safety lines. Those pathways, those driving lanes, that's what I'm more concerned with, because even if we do have 20 feet of pavement, it could be 20 feet of shoulder that we're not meant to drive on, or a rumble strip, or anything that is on the very edge that might not be as safe and secure as the main issue and avenue of that asphalt. So if we outline and designate this as driving lanes, that's where cars belong. Once you get outside those safety lines, that's for minor corrections or stuff going off the edge. I don't want to count that. I want to have something that's very definitive. So if we have those 2 driving lanes and call it whatever, width it needs to be, is that more acceptable for a safety standpoint, or am I just off key? And I'm mainly looking at Sean for this.
Yeah, so there's a couple of factors. Obviously, when it's speed, that's why cars, roads, you might naturally drive. You on Cannon Road, 2 cars, you think, even if they signed it at 60, you're not going to feel comfortable driving 60. So speed and width of the road, they go hand in hand together. So that's why some people, you can have 22-foot width pavement, but they'll purposely stripe it narrower visually to force you to drive smaller. And
Exactly,
if you need to,
traffic
you swing
only.
out. So a couple of things you got to keep in mind. I think it makes sense based on some of these roads. Hopefully the speed limit's not too high if they're under 18 foot anyway, but speed should be a factor. Not every road is striped on the outside edges. We don't have the money in the parish to go stripe outside lanes everywhere we need to do it. So can't assume there's always going to be striping. But when you don't see stripe, people treat that as a drivable surface anyway.
Right.
Striping forces you to stay within it. So we could be having a 22-foot wide roadway, but if we go and stripe it 8 foot, we're going to have some of these mirror collisions that we're talking about because it's guiding people in the wrong.
Well, and
spot.
that's what I'm saying.
So there's a couple of just design, little nuances, things that we need to get into, but to me, it feels like the intent of this meeting is agree in principle on some of these things, because there's things sprinkled throughout the ordinance that if we commit to that, it has to get altered. For example, we talked about there's no fences where there's servitudes, but there's places such as townhouse ordinance requires a fence or a buffer around it. So it's an ordinance that requires it, but we're telling you not to do it. Drainage ordinance says you're required to do it, but you're not to have a fence. So I just, hearing a lot of this, it's y'all making some very important key and principal decisions, but I'm sure the whole point of Kindig here is that that's great, but the final version, in my opinion, that goes to the council, they'll have to, like, because you made this decision, I had to go dive into the townhome ordinance and tweak that, because I can't say no fences and servitudes, but that ordinance requires it.
That makes sense.
Same thing about the 20-foot in pavement, the nuances about some being striped versus speed and stuff, those things that have to be tweaked. I just don't know if the intent is every single thing that gets touched in ordinance has to circle back through y'all when y'all agree in principle. We need to be driving something 20 foot in width for 2 vehicles.
Right. So the better option would be, as far as here, to just go with 20 feet of pavement and then let y'all determine somewhere else in the code, whether that's 9 feet of striped pavement or come up with some chart based on
We
speed or
define the
whatever.
pavement, it's either width of roadway when not striped, or when striped, it's the distance between the outside edges of the lanes, of the striped areas.
And
You can get that excluding separations of medians, those little 2 or 3 sentences, but we're agreeing you need 20 foot.
20 foot of pavement either way.
Yes.
Because my concern becomes something like 930, where you've got the road, nowhere along it is 18 feet, much less 20 feet, and it's a hazard, and, I've been run off into the ditch 3 times.
Tiggy's width is one way, but they had the super fat pavement to force you visually to want to drive the lines slower, so that's forcing you to get closer. It wants you to drive smaller, even though the pavement's there. So there's a little couple of things that I can imagine because it will be a debate. Y'all have all been there before. It is 20 foot. We're measuring pavement to pavement, but it's not stripes. So do we get into the stripe argument? Is it inside the stripe to stripe or outside the stripe to stripe?
Well, and my idea about striping is that would be a minor expense if it was 20 feet but not striped or whatever, that somebody, particularly a developer, would be willing to incur. Is I'll pay for striping, or the parish can stripe something even and have it in their master plan as that calming effect or whatnot in order to maintain everything. Right. Yeah, and so that's one of my reasons for striping.
Yeah, but I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think that what we're doing here is, we're trying to be generic at this stage of the code, at another part of the code, another section of the code, where we're going to codify the roads a little bit better. We'll be talking about striping, we'll be talking about lanes, we'll be talking about the width of the stripes in the middle of the road, and those are the specifications. So this is just establishing a minimum width of pavement for us to approve a subdivision. That's what we're doing here.
Because if you've got 20 feet of pavement, you should be able to pass 2 of those large vehicles next to each other without causing an issue. I mean, look, when my kids were still young enough to take the bus to school instead of drive themselves, I can't tell you how many times I've sat in the driveway with my son and watched as 2 buses pass and their mirrors hit, or one bus goes off where the tires are over, like actually going over the ditch. And you're thinking, if that bus driver just sneezes, they're going into the ditch because half the tire is hanging off anyway. So,
and also, it's not just speaker on.
No,
It's not just that.
Go ahead.
You realize how many 16-foot trailers are 104 inches wide, which is 8.5.
Right.
And if you have a 9-foot lane and you have 2 trailers passing one another, that is tight.
It's scary.
But as someone who has driven big trucks all through this parish, and I've had to pull my West Coast mirrors in and hang my outside tire off the pavement just to pass school buses and dump trucks and things. I mean, I've done that. You have to come to a stop to pass one another. So 20 foot it could be wider, but at minimum 20 feet of pavement.
Do we have a motion on this item?
I move.
Okay, Commissioner Kermit's made a motion to recommend approval to the parish council.
Yes.
Second by Chick Snyder. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item, section 17-4032B, access and connectivity.
When's food going to be served?
When's food going to get served?
We ordering pizza?
I've I'm just going to throw this at you, at y'all. I think that, I want to make it clear that when we're talking about item 3, access points, we're not requiring them to have 2 separate driveways off of the highway. Their separate access point could be through the adjacent development, correct? Okay.
Yeah, because that would be an existing roadway. Yeah, I mean, that would be an existing roadway if there's a road there.
Well, but we've ran into a situation where that existing development shows up screaming bloody murder and says, we don't want those people going through our community. We have a development that came before us not too long ago. It had, 2, 4, 5 available roads to interconnect, and they ended up with 1 roadway.
And I voted against getting rid of those connections, for the record. No, but I think what this article is doing is now making that mandatory. It's taking away the power of the commission to say, well, when the mob shows up with the pitchforks to say, don't connect to my subdivision, the commission no longer has that authority. And to that point, I guess, Tarek, the 3 potential changes that I was looking at to clarify that would be 5, where it says the planning commission may modify, say the planning commission may only modify. That way it's clear.
Good change. Yeah.
And quite honestly, personally, I wouldn't even have that in there. I wouldn't allow modification at all, but I understand the potential safety issue stated in A and B, although I think that's probably overblown and should be connected anyway, considering most of our subdivisions don't have sidewalks. But I think C is too vague, because I'm just concerned anything can be an environmentally sensitive area. And so I would think that part needs to be removed. And then the only other thing I would do is recommend adding a subsection D, or I guess it would be C if we remove, no, it would be D, capital D. So you've got capital A, B, C, so this would be capital D that says, and I'm sorry, I typed my language in my phone and I didn't pull it up, so give me 1 second to get to it. Where I would say, no variance shall be granted from any provision of the requirements of this article. And the main issue there is I've seen too many instances where someone comes up and requests a variance and gets one, even when the variance article says they shouldn't. So, they come up and say, oh, well, it's economically disadvantageous. You granted a variance to someone else, you should grant it to me. Our code specifically precludes us from granting variances in those situations, and the commission grants them anyway. So I think we need to have, this is, I think, one of the most important parts of this, because this is what's going to, of anything, this is going to be the best thing to fix the traffic problem. If all our subdivisions connected, we wouldn't have a traffic problem, and I think there needs to be no variance granted to this section. And I would explicitly state it.
On that point, sorry to interrupt, it's a little bit challenging in this format, but the capital D, no variance granted for this section, should we qualify that beyond any modifications per C5 above, correct? Because you can modify the standards as a planning commission, you're not granting a variance to this section of the code.
Right, so I don't think it's necessary. And the way I would interpret that, 5C is a permissible modification. So if for only the 2 or 3, depending on what we do with subsection C, explicit items identified in 4032B, and then D says you're not allowed to grant any variance to this particular article, but those modifications are allowed because that's set in now. I mean, if you want to include that language at the end, so no variance shall be granted for any requirement of this section, other than the modification specifically, identified in section C5, just to clarify that, that's fine. But I think there needs to be something explicit, because I think this is more than anything else as what we've done. I guess this and the traffic impact analysis are going to be the 2 biggest changes that are going to, help the traffic issues.
Yep.
What about the number of lots, the thresholds for triggering the secondary access?
C3?
Say in C3.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask.
I mean, I figured he's the expert. I'm kind of relying on him for that.
But it depends on the shape of the lot, the property.
Well,
If
Patrick
it's
did bring up a
narrow
very
at-
good
at-
point.
Off the highway, you can't put but one entrance.
Well, but it's not necessarily, so if you have a lot or a subdivision and it's got, say, 60 lots, and there's a vacant piece of property next to it, and you're doing a stub out to that vacant piece of property, does that constitute an access point?
Yes.
I was interpreting it as a did.
Yes.
Right.
So,
Even though it just dead ends into an empty lot,
Right.
correct? Yes, okay.
and so the
Yes,
thought being that the
yes.
second subdivision comes and builds next to it, and that one all connects there and then connects to another road, that gives you your two, you're trying to get through connectivity.
Well, and one of the things I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I've seen a lot of subdivisions that have 50 lots and they, 70 lots, and they work fine with the one access, okay? I almost prefer a number like 75 and 150 rather than 50, 100. I mean, I think that, we've got a lot of parcels of land that are just skinny but deep. And, and there may not be an opportunity for them to connect next door because the land is developed already. And the only option they have is for one.
Well, but then this wouldn't apply, right?
Well,
Because you've got B2, if it's, wait, let me see. Because I think I looked at a landlocked provision, a landlocked parcel of land, shall apply to new development, 20 lots or more, or.
No, it
No,
would
it-
apply
no, it
to,
would
in
still
that
apply.
situation.
It will or would not?
No, it would.
It will apply.
So, I mean, I think at that stage of the game, you essentially rendered a parcel of land. So I think you gotta have a bigger number for those scenarios. Because those scenarios, you're gonna end up with, in the neighborhood of 70 to 80 lots, give or take. So to me, 75 is a better number for that, and 150 for the other number. My opinion.
Well, I guess, what was the 50 and 100 based on? Was that on research or common practice elsewhere, or what was the?
Yeah, a combination of those and discussions with Sean and the rest of staff as well, just from what types of subdivisions have been proposed over the last 5 years. What is the common practice? And so we landed on those numbers. If 75 is a more palatable number, I mean, I'm happy to entertain that. It's a big jump from 50 to get to 75. That's 50% jump.
Just depends on the location of the
but-
property and what's
Sean,
available next door.
your thoughts from a traffic perspective, does 50 to 75 make a big difference?
I know y'all hate to hear this. It's really a case by case. I mean, we get
know. It
planning
is.
commit, I mean, we pre-apps, we don't make the final decisions, we provide suggestions based on, is the land opened? Is the adjacent subdivision next to it private? What's the likelihood if it's all wetlands to the left-hand side of anyone to develop it? There's no sense of just forcing it to happen because we're obligated to find 2 spots or 1 spots. And we just look at it, and of course, we're doing our best guess when it comes to you all.
Okay, well then that.
It's tough. Like, if I had a 50-lot subdivision and there was an easy accessible spot to the side from another existing subdivision, I want to make that happen, even if it's 50 lots.
I agree.
If I have 200 lots and it's surrounded by wetlands, forest, forest wood off El Landry, it's just surrounded by wetlands, it's like, how much do you force connections if it was a big subdivision, like 4 around the corner? When it's so much wetlands, you really don't even want to develop it there around it. Do you force yourself to have it just to have it?
Well, if that's the case, then I think Commissioner Chaison's, suggestion to prohibit any variances or modifications to standards, presents an even bigger problem, because I can take the 50, without explanation. I'm good with the 50 and 100, but we would want to look at modifying that requirement in the event of wetlands, in the event of certain circumstances, so.
But I think the issue is, so like in your circumstance, Sean, they could put the stub outs, and if nobody ever develops there, then it's not an issue anyway.
Well, someone's got to be there first. But the thing I just wetlands, I'm sorry, Tarek, he's got it, environment sensitive area. That's where that's the wetlands component of it. You wouldn't require it if they're surrounded by wetlands. So that example I gave you, we would say, yes, your 100 lots, we need to find 2 spots, 3 spots for you. But on the 2 sides of you, it's environmentally sensitive areas already to the left. So that takes away 2. Now we're down to 1. And I really can't find, I'm not going to force you to have 2 on adjacent roadway, because 2 on adjacent roadway is against DOT's principles of having too many drives on a roadway. It creates more traffic. So that's the part of me, an engineer, I'm overcomplicating it. Very fundamentally, connectivity helps out traffic. It helps out safety. If it's there, you need a way to connect to it. If you're the first one there, you need a plan for people in the future. There's the wetlands and there's other things that's got to be considered. Got to be considered.
Mr. Chairman.
So get rid of the D, leave C, and then just put the only.
Only be after May.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes better sense.
All right.
Okay. The discussion by the commissioners was, how to clean up some of the changes that we discussed, and I think Commissioner Chason is thinking of making a.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'm not going to, not to approve, I'm just a proposed amendment because I see Wade still has some, but so I'm just going to make a motion to amend section C5 so that it reads, the Planning Commission may only modify the standards in this subsection C if, and then leave the rest of it as it is.
Okay.
Do I have a second to that?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to make one amendment by Commissioner Chason, seconded by Chick Snyder. All in favor?
Discussion.
Would you repeat the motion?
Yeah. So we're just including the word only under
After
5, after May in 5, and I'm not going to.
Only modify?
Right, so and what I'm going to do, I'm not going to make the motion to remove subsection C, like I had said, and I'm not going to make the motion to prohibit the variance.
And I just have a few questions.
Wait, let's just take action on that one request, one change.
Okay.
That's all we're doing, is
Okay.
adding that word. All in favor to that?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, Commissioner Chick Snyder.
The real question I had is, and I've seen this in some of our presentations, and let's take, I think it's Harbor Crossing, Councilman Lawler's subdivision. It's like 1.5 miles long, 1-lane subdivision. If there is an emergency that happens halfway through, people in the rear are stuck. What avenues do we have in this type of new section to prevent that type of build out again? Because that does cause some health, safety, and welfare issues.
There's just some pieces of land, the way Sitchin Parish was originally carved out, the old 1 mile by 1 mile blocks, it's just long and skinny. A lot on each side. Only thing you can do is, if you're that nervous about it, is restricting the number of lots to an acceptable condition if there's really only one way out. There's some large subdivisions in East Baton Rouge Parish, 850 lots, one way in and out. It's not ideal. It's just, there was no way to make a connection to something else.
And look, to your point, if that subdivision were developed, I used to live in that subdivision, Lake Harbor. There are places where they could have connected that subdivision to adjacent roads and chose not to. So under because that's like 400, I think 300, 400 lots. And if you live in the back of the subdivision, it takes you 10 minutes just to get to Highway 42. I believe if that subdivision were developed today under this standards that have been required to either connect to Ancient Pathway or Manchac Crossing or go through to one of the Manchac Acres, to Manchac Acres Road, that would have given you your second access. And then that actually would have fixed the issue with the people who live off Manchac Acres who can't cross Muddy Creek because the bridge is down, because they could have gone through Manchac Harbor, and that fixes your safety issue. So had this provision been in place when Manchac Harbor was developed, that wouldn't be a problem.
So to answer your question, what you were saying is like, if we had a piece of land and said it was, I don't know, 300 lots, what the number is, and we know that's a lot of lots, they'd only have one access and it's not safe, and then if they said, well, I have nowhere to connect to, we say, well, if you were a 50-lot subdivision, I'd be more comfortable with you. So maybe your piece of land for health, safety, and welfare for all the future lots is just a not acceptable piece to develop on. So you're just going to have to go to 50 lots that you're comfortable with. By having the type of teeth that Chason's looking at on here is just, if you can't make it work, then it's like indirect saying that's just not ready to develop that scale of development.
Okay. And that's what I wanted to make sure of, is if we have that discretion to make those suggestions to lower a lot size or anything like that. And you also kind of mentioned, I just want to make sure for clarification, that DOTD is promoting against multiple in and outs on one property, one lane, one avenue?
Pretty much on any streets. The more drives that you allow on a street, the more you decrease the level of service of that same two-lane roadway somewhere else. So you all driven on two-lane roads with 0 drives, you can drive a whole different speed than having to stop and wait for a left turn at every single drive. It takes then your capacity, more people, more conflict. So it's, so DOTD and their access management, they actually say, almost try to force like 2 commercial properties to say, you're only getting it right in, right out. So if you want your property to work well, you probably need to go talk to your neighbor. You all work out a mutually good arrangement. Maybe one has access to signal, but now there's to force that to happen. So the situation we're talking about, large subdivisions that really had no real access, then that would encourage them to go talk to the next adjacent property owners. I got to have 2 ways in and out. Let's work together. And you can get a servitude access through this for this property. That makes your property more developable. So yes, DOTD and the parish should always discouraging forcing too many drives, conflicts on the roads. You have to factor in safety, especially in particular near intersections. You know.
And does this also help combine, for instance, I live in Germany Oaks. We have phase 1, phase 2. There's just one road between phase 1 and 2, and the main entrance to that subdivision comes in through phase 1, then has a small turn in on phase 2. That's the only connectivity. Should we also encourage further interconnectivity in these subdivisions to where there's not one, try to limit as many one checkpoint or choke point methods? Or do we just get into too much oversight at that point?
I think that's getting a little too much in my opinion. A lot of times there's usually more connectivity if they can make the, pretty much when you lay out a subdivision, when you're laying down a street, ideally for cost for a developer, you want to be able, if I'm laying one street, I won't have lots on both sides. You don't lay one street, you only get one row. So a lot of times it's just most efficient use of the land. I'm surprised they were only able to make one connection, but it could have been because they had a horseshoe-shaped pond in the middle, and it just didn't work out. You could only have one. So my opinion is not to force the interconnectivity too much. It's probably going to work out the way that you would want to.
Commissioner Shea,
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to recommend Section 174032B as amended to the council.
Second.
Second by Sheikh Snyder. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item, Section 174037, Servitudes. Anybody have any comments?
No comments.
Motion?
Motion to recommend 174037 to the council for approval.
And second.
Second by Commissioner Chason. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Section 174039, block requirements.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval to the council.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Sheikh Snyder, second by Commissioner Chason. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item, Section 174060, traffic impact analysis.
Can I make a general comment before we get into this final section? It's the most substantial section, so I know we're going to have discussion here. Due to the way that we did our redlining, I think it might appear that most of this is new language to the parish, and it is not the case. A lot of the reason for the red ink on the page, or in your packet, I think it was blue ink on the page, is because we took this from one part of the code and codified it differently with a different list and formatting system. And so a lot of it ended up appearing as a track change. I just want you to be aware of that fact as we continue the discussion.
Okay, well, look, I have a request to just take a 5-minute restroom break. So could we do that, please? So we will reconvene. It is, by my watch, 8:06. How about if we reconvene at 8:10? Welcome back. The Planning Commission is now back in session. Okay. All right. Tariq, before we get started on this, I'd like to, just in the interest of the public and everybody, if Sean could just highlight for us the similarities between what we have here and what we used to have, okay? Because I noticed that it's the format, it's been formatted, and that's the bulk of the changes. And I thought maybe, Sean, if you could do that for us, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, I'll do my best just to try to summarize. So yes, the original traffic impact policy pretty much essentially stayed the same. I believe the proposed changes to make sure it's very clear it's part of an ordinance thing rather than a policy. That's one of the big changes. The other big changes, even though it's the same criteria, pretty much same criteria, the proposed change on here on who does it is probably the biggest change that most of the public will be concerned about, to where right now it's noted as the parish's hired contractor to do it, but they're still doing the same type of study. I did notice that there was, in the past, there was some, when we talk about drops of level service at an intersection, was it per leg or per overall? The ERA, we always interpreted it at both, the overall and per leg. But there were some times I got stretched a little bit, and I just said for consistency and intent, the way that I read it, there's like two senses, you can read it either way, the old way. This cleared it up, made it easier for everyone going forward. What's the intent? And that is overall and each leg.
Okay.
That's one of the big things. And it looks like there was additional items regarding what happens if something, you don't meet the criteria. There's some additional mitigation measures that they listed there. At the bottom, I believe it's section G, there's some additional items that were listed. And the main thing, another big thing is they made it easier. When you looked at the previous thresholds, the only thing difference, I think, from a threshold 3 and a 2 was just go get some crash data. So why don't we just go ahead and just, I think Commissioner Johnson was one of us, why don't we just add the crash data? We're that close away, and we can easily say we did the highest threshold, just go ahead and do it. So now it's really, if you're 40 or less, you're really not analyzing everything, you're just looking at your driveway connection. Anything greater than 40, you're doing a full intersection analysis, which includes the crash data, assuming that's available. That's the only thing I want to caution. Most crash data comes from the sheriff's and police station that collects the data. If for some reason you're on a route that it's not available, that's, I guess we'll get to that point whenever we get to it. But the main changes is breaking the thresholds from instead of 3, consolidating them down to 2. The trigger points are still the same. It's 40, pretty much 40 trips. Hired by parish contractor, and the level service intersections is overall and per leg. And that's what I've scanned. I hope I didn't. I think I got the, Tariq may have to highlight if I missed any other ones there. But
Tariq has thumb up. He's good.
Yeah. I don't see how well I did.
Yeah. Nice work.
Do you need to add anything else, Tariq?
No, I think the only thing that he left out was just the clarifications within the traffic scoping meeting itself. Right now, you've got several run-on paragraphs describing the procedure of the TIA process, and we've just added additional language to say who does what, who turns in what, and what is the timing associated with each of those actions.
Okay. All right. With that, I'll open it for discussion.
All right. I've got a couple of things, not many, and I don't think they're going to be too, it's active. So section 3 little d, the two proposals I'm looking at is, and there's two things with this one. One is so that in the parentheses, it would say Labor Day, comma, exam weeks, and on any day in which a school has an early release day. And I know you don't understand, but I can't tell you how many times we've been here looking at data or traffic analysis, and it just so happens that the traffic analysis was conducted on the day that Dutchtown High School has an early release day. I think I can think of at least 4 off the top of my head where that happened. And the problem with that, it's just coincidence that it just always on 73 happens to be an early release day. And the issue is, and I know what you're trying to look at here is making sure you're getting an accurate traffic analysis of what traffic is normally like. And those early release days only occur once or twice a month. And so I think clarifying, we don't do them during Christmas break, we don't do them during spring break, Mardi Gras, Labor Day, just throwing in the early release, exam weeks, throwing in the early release day as well. The second proposed change to this section is to add a sentence that says counts shall not be conducted during a declared state of emergency. And I think that'll clear up the issue we had with one traffic analysis being conducted during phase 2 of COVID when nobody was driving. And then also any other emergencies you would have where maybe somebody's running a traffic count and there's a hurricane or something and it throws off the traffic pattern, so that during a declared state of emergency, we're not going to take counts conducted during that period. So that would be the 2 proposed recommendations I'm looking at there. The only other one I've got is on section capital G2, and this is an issue that we've had before. So the first sentence, you say, and this is existing language, and it says this section may be denied, and I think that needs to be shall. And the way I'm interpreting what was intended here is that if the level of service is below a D, then it shall be denied unless basically the proposed subdivider can come in and mitigate, and you've got all of your mitigation sections that you've added, but they can mitigate it up to a D in order to get that approval. And I think the way this was originally written is that's taken care of by the second sentence. The problem we've had with prior interpretations of this article is everybody wants to argue, well, it says may instead of shall. So even if you're at a level of service below a D and you can't mitigate it to above a D, well, it just says may, so just approve it anyway. And that's been one of the big loopholes here is the use of the permissive may rather than the mandatory shall. So that would be my only other recommendation, and that's based off of issues that we've had with this committee before, is if you're trying to tighten up the language, and that was the other loophole. One was the overall versus leg, and then the other one was may versus shall. And so just clarifying that. So I'll make those, I guess, as 3 separate motions, because I'm assuming people may have different positions on those whenever time is right to do so. I don't know if you want me to do those now.
No, let's just go ahead and get everybody's discussion first.
Yeah, that's what I thought. All right.
I just want to point out one other thing I just noticed. They also cleaned up the language in mitigation G2. Before, you used to be able to read, in my opinion, it said only if the proposed development, and you had 4 or 5 things. So the confusion was, did the proposed development cause the existing road to be overburdened? That's one interpretation. Or if it's just the proposed development is within a development area that has an existing road that's below the level of service. It's 2 different meanings. They cleaned that up, or maybe I'm reading it differently later tonight, but to be here, it's much clearer. It's if your proposed development did these things, or if you're just within an area that has infrastructure that's below a D, you shall, or however we word the language, be denied. So that part got cleaned up also got cleaned up as part of these changes.
Mr. Chairman.
I like the word may because some of the mitigation that they're offering may not be palatable. And so
I guess I'm not.
Well, anyway, go ahead, Commissioner Shakespeare.
One of the things I did not see in here, and maybe I missed it, is we do a preliminary traffic study. After or whatever, if we have some recommended mitigation techniques, we don't go back and verify that study was accurate, that level of service did improve, anything like that. So one thing I would like to see is some form of check and balance of if there are some mitigation methods that are included in that traffic study, some mitigation recommendations, that after those mitigation recommendations are in place, that level of service and/or traffic study that was preliminarily done is accurate? And if so, we need to hold some, make sure that that's all taken care of. How could we have that incorporated into this, Sean?
I think Aaron's gonna like this. I think it may be a may statement at the end. The Planning Commission may choose to do a post-construction analysis, but a lot of times you gotta have the houses built to generate the traffic to see if your solution worked. So that's one of the challenges. And then once you have it built, how do you go backwards? So if it's a multi-phase large development, say large developments has a phased project, there were some developments we know of, they can only go one phase, and then they said they reanalyze it again. Large-scale developments may require proof that the first set of traffic improvements mitigated the first filing. It may have the right to not allow any future filings until a revised study has been in place to reassess the previous. So tough things about traffic is you're predicting a snapshot in the future. And there should be other things. A new plant comes in and they change their shift times.
Exactly.
A new school comes in, changes everyone's traffic distribution patterns, times, and days. We're having trouble getting bus drivers. We got to do double laps. There's a lot of little things, and we're trying to just predict the future. It's just that's a lot of risk, in my opinion, to say, wait till you build your houses to generate the traffic. Now go see if you did it. It doesn't work, and I'm going to stop you. To me, it makes sense a large phase development. So maybe there should be a may type of language.
If I may, let's let Mr. Tariq respond as well, too.
Thank you. This is Tark. We added 4 new mitigation measures in section G2. A through D are new mitigation measures. Letter D is eliminate the potential for letter C, divide the proposed development into phases and authorize only those phases that can be accommodated while maintaining an LOSD or better. So that was kind of the idea that you're talking about now, is that, look, if the traffic impact analysis comes back and says, we're still getting some Fs here, one of the things you can do is divide into phases. You only build the phase where you can do D, and then you have to measure again and say, all right, can we build phase 2 now that we've done additional mitigation measures? Yeah. So you may feel that with that small letter C that it addresses the issue that you've raised. Otherwise, happy to include an additional statement 6 at the bottom that would just say, the parish may from time to time conduct additional study to basically see if mitigation is working as stated.
Well, and that's my thought process behind it. So off of Germany, we had a development that we had some restrictions, and they had to have those mitigation measures in effect before we allowed them to build. The thought process behind it was that they would have put a roundabout. However, the developer paid for a traffic light. This is not suspiciously, it is suspected that really hasn't mitigated it properly, because that roundabout is still coming in and is going to be in place. So we want to make sure that mitigation measure is being done properly to accommodate those level of services. So that's why I was asking for potentially even a post, or like you said in this, if we divided it into phases, that's fine, but...
Yeah, I think even maybe a time component. Let's say a project comes in, it takes them 2 years to build. I mean, we're doing our best to predict, so exactly, it's either per phase, or if expected duration of the project is not to be complete within 2 years, shall be required another study. Imagine if you had a 10-year built-out subdivision, you want to be able to go back and check it. Germany was a great one. What they thought was the reality of the subdivisions was one, and all of a sudden now a school pops up. Well, if that development is delayed 2 years, the school goes out there, the whole traffic patterns have changed, but you approved that project, they didn't know when the school was going to happen first.
Right.
So yeah,
I like
Tarek has this seat component, but the time component, which is as fast as Central Parish is growing, is another important factor. Phases and/or
filings.
Well, yeah. When we're talking about, when we're talking about phases and filings, I would love to see us do all our traffic based on phases. They want to file multiple plats of a phase. They want to break a phase into multiple filings. I'm good with that. But your traffic and your master plan and our approval are based on phases, period. You want to submit a phase and you want to break it down into three plats? Go for it. But as far, just in the interest of clarity, all our traffic analysis, all our approvals should be based on phases so that we're consistent in our analysis and we don't end up with the confusion that we have on several projects of, do we approve filings or phases?
Well, I think that when you introduce the two different languages terms is where it got confused. I think if somebody wants to do 3 filings, if that's what they're calling it, then they need to do a traffic analysis for each one. So if they're doing, and then that way, it's.
I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, I want to do a development of 700 lots, and my phase 1 is 200 lots, okay? And I do my, and for whatever reason, I wanna spread out the construction of that subdivision. And the 200 lots, I'm gonna do it in a 70, a 70, and a 40-foot subdivision. So I'm gonna make 3 filings to complete that subdivision. So I'm gonna go 3 times through the permit process to finish out phase 1. I'm good with that. I don't have a problem with that, and I don't have a problem investing him for the traffic for that phase. But what I do have a problem is when, they sit here and they say, oh, I'm gonna have, 3 filings, but I might make more filings, and then we end up confused with what's a phase, what's a filing, and then we have no record of exactly how it was broken down. So I think if we limit the conversation to phases when we're doing a traffic study on a multiple phase subdivision, right? If they want to do different filings because they want to break up that development, that phase into multiple pieces, I'm good with that. So long as you don't trigger that phase without that other traffic study.
But are those terms defined anywhere? Because in my
That's why
6
I'm
years
bringing
on
it
here,
up.
I only remember one time when somebody used the word phase instead of filings, and that was the one that we had all the confusion on. Every other time, it's just been filings. And so if they want to do 800 lots and they want to do 70, 70, 70, 30, 150, then they got to do it, and that's how they want to do it, then they need to do traffic analysis at 70, at 70, at 30, at 150.
Well, the reality of it is that we've only had really a couple of developments that were big enough to warrant that, okay? But that doesn't mean that in the future we're not going to have some more of those. And for me, it's a great opportunity to clean the language of how we reference it. I mean, we ought to be consistent on, the traffic should be based on either, if you want to do it on filings, I'm fine with that too, but I think it needs to be consistent. It's either one or the other.
I'm good
We
with
should not be able to
phases.
interchange the terminology.
I mean, if 99% of the subdivisions use filings, then I think it should be filings. Like I said, I can only think of one subdivision that used phases in the entire time I've been on the commission, unless I'm wrong.
Jerome,
but
can you comment on that?
Well, I agree, there was a confusion about phasing and filings. Whichever one you want to use, we're fine with. I think I've always looked at them synonymously. And if you'd prefer using the word phase, that's fine. Typically, when we see a filing, it's for a final plat.
Correct.
That consumes one phase of the project, lack of a better term.
Or a portion of a phase.
Yeah.
It could be a portion of a phase. It doesn't
Well,
necessarily.
it could be a
phase.
portion of a phase. Yes, it could be, yes. But usually it refers to the final plat that's being filed with the clerk's office.
Right.
But when they do the preliminary
That's
plat,
been my interpretation of it, at least.
but when they come before us with the preliminary plat, it's, Lakes at whatever filing 1.
Right.
And then they come back later with Lakes at whatever filing 2. Or they file them both at the same time.
Right.
And so I guess my thought is if we use the word filing everywhere else in the code, and every time they come before us, they're using filing with the exception of one time, then to be consistent, the language should be filing.
Okay.
I mean, that's just my thought. And again,
Yeah.
Tarek is the expert on I guess, the codal portion of this and can maybe speak better to that. But I can only remember one time anybody's ever used phase. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
I just, like Jerome, I think for the most part, they were synonymous. And in that particular case, all they did was take the phase and divide it into filings or lump a bunch of filings together to call it a phase, ostensibly to get around having to do another traffic study. Let's be honest about it. That's what happened. They were trying to get out of having to do another traffic study. So they took a bunch of filings, combined them, called it a phase, and thought they could pull a fast one by confusing the language. I mean, that's what it was.
I can tell you in a lot of the parts of the country, the term is phases, and more importantly, when you file your final plat, it has to match the phase, or else you don't get anywhere. So my preference is to use phase, just because I'm familiar with what's done in several other parts of the country. And Tarek, is that not correct?
Yeah. In my experience, phases are less related to the plats and more related to how you plan to do the ultimate construction on the property. What is the timing of development? The filings, which a lot of communities use both terms, filings and phases. Filings refers to that final plat. How many lots are in each filing? You might have several filings within a phase 2 of a 3-phase project. It doesn't matter. As long as we're spelling out within the TIA requirements that you have to account for all phases of your project and all filings of your project within that initial TIA, or you can do them one at a time. If level of service is only functional for phase 1, then you'll have to come back at another time and do another traffic study for phases 2 and 3.
In my experience, Chairman, the word phase and filing is just as Tarek described, but it's also used by the development community from a financing perspective, because they'll be going to the bank for financing on phase 1 of the project, as an example, and then they're going to lay phase 2 in abeyance. And then once phase 1 has been finalized, they'll go to the bank and get financing for phase 2. So in the development community, it's used as a financing tool, so to speak, to go to the bank and get funds to move your project along. All right.
Okay, Ricky?
Could we create something in the definition section that says a project may be broken into multiple phases? A phase may be broken into multiple filings. So if you're a single phase, single street kind of subdivision, you're going to be a single phase project, or a 2-phase project, kind of like the one where Scheck lives. But something like Riverton could have 5 phases and 30 filings. But I think the traffic study should be based on the phases of that project.
Okay, I agree.
We're on the same page. Tarek, what do you think?
I think that works well.
Okay, let's do that.
So I want to have some type of verification on, so whenever somebody has a preliminary plat, it's multi-phasal, they're going to do a traffic study. After each phase is complete, we need to have some type of verification of that traffic study as of right there. For phase 1's complete, verify that traffic study. Phase 2 is complete, verify that traffic study. And so then they can't go on further until they've shown that those mitigation methods either have been completed or are additionally needed.
But if they're required to, so they finish phase 1 and then they want to move on to phase 2, if they're required to do a new traffic study to get phase 2 approved, you're functionally doing that anyway.
Yeah,
no, what you're doing is that you're showing that traffic study is saying there may be some additional mitigation measures that need to be done.
But I think
they've still got preliminary plat approval.
But I think you have a takings issue. So if you approve a subdivision to be developed with this set of mitigation, and then you come back and say, okay, it's been developed, but the mitigation didn't do what we think it should have. So now we want you to do more mitigation after you've already built the subdivision. I don't think you can do that legally.
No,
You're retroactively coming back and I mean, that's a takings problem.
Yeah,
I don't think you can do that. Legally, I don't think you can do that.
once you've approved the project, subject to mitigation with a whatever, I mean, that developer has vested that capacity, that density, those trips, for lack of a better term. You can't just change your mind 2 years later and say, oh, the school got built next door, so, we're gonna take your trips away from you. It doesn't work that way. He's been vested.
Well, and I understand that, but let's say, for instance, what if it's just a fault in engineering? What if it's improper, calculations? All we're doing, and it's the same thing in drainage later on. This is what, I mean, it's a traffic study, so it's not it's scientific in the sense, but it's not verifiable until after these houses are built. Once this first phase is done, all we're doing is asking, for instance, hey, let's make sure that this was done. What if you were off? What if they need to all of a sudden see that we need to have additional roadways or additional turn lanes or some other type of mitigation effects?
But that would be required to get approval for phase two when they do the new traffic study. Because they would have to do a new traffic study, and presumably if to get phase two, and presumably if the mitigation didn't work, you would fail the phase two traffic study. And then they'd have to mitigate before they can move forward with phase two, right? Terry?
So we have no real way of verifying those traffic studies.
Well,
basically.
the problem with the traffic study is that it is scientific, and there's a lot of work. I mean, traffic engineering is a very sophisticated, professional service, okay? These guys are real engineers. But at the end of the day, it's a snapshot in time. So there could be lots of things that take place after that day. Remember, once he gets approved by us, he's going to go through a lengthy permitting process before he can start doing anything. And then he's got to build a subdivision, then he's got to record the plat, and then he can start building houses. So that could take 2 years, Jerome, more or less.
Yeah.
So, you took a snapshot 2 years ago. Lots of things can happen. 2 years later, if you were to do a traffic study, God only knows what could be different. Somebody may have gone down the street on a piece of property and by right built a bar. You can't just, once a development is approved, there's a certain amount of vesting, and I think Commissioner Chaison's 100%. You start walking in the realm of takings when you start going back and saying, oh, things have changed, I'm sorry, and you didn't get your permit in time, I'm sorry, we're going to take your approvals away.
So perhaps there's something in the.
Go ahead, Terry. Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to mention just a couple of things here. One is this, in G, number 3, when traffic mitigation is required as part of an approved TIA, it's got to be done before you get building permits, right? And we've changed that from occupancy permit to building permit. So you have to mitigate before you can pull your building permits. And then you also need a TIA approval letter or letter of compliance if you have divided into construction phases that say, look, we're going to do that mitigation later when we come back for the construction phases. I think, when you are asking for approval of a phased preliminary plat, you either account for all of the phases within that TIA, or you decide you only are asking for approval of the first phase, knowing that you're going to have to come back and ask for additional approval with subsequent phases. That's really at the option of the developer. That wouldn't be the parish saying you must divide this into phases and must do separate TIAs. It's, what did you ask for at that scoping meeting? Do you want to do one TIA for the entire phased development? If so, then you have to build it according to those phases. Otherwise, you're going to have to come back and do another study. So it wouldn't be a takings in that regard. You're not, because you've spelled it out at the beginning. We approved this all with at the preliminary plat stage as one TIA for the entire development. Now he wants to split it up and do things differently, then that's going to require a different study.
Just a different study, correct. Mr. Compton?
So when I was in another life in the development world, you ask whether or not a particular piece of property passes 5 rules. So is it legally permissible, financially feasible, physically possible, maximally productive? Maybe that's 4 rules. So generally speaking, if you write a code that a development community can't answer those questions, you're never going to get development. So you can't take away the ability for them to get something approved and tell them halfway through, nope, we've removed that, you got to do it again because we don't believe what you told us the first time. Well, you don't get to do that. You have to write the code so that you get the answer and you have to live with it. It is what it is. You cannot change the rule midstream for a developer who's committed millions of dollars. You just can't do it. You will get sued and you will lose.
Yep.
So
Correct.
the one possible, I agree with Ricky on that. One possible thing, if nuance there, let's say you did a multi-traffic study to accommodate 7 phases. You know, at phase 1, you had to do nothing. Phase 2 and 3, you had to go build a roundabout down the road. It cost $2 million, preliminary cost estimate. But after year 2, after that first phase, let's go back. So they're already fully committed to probably a $2 million expense. So after maybe for 2 years, you go back and reevaluate before we tell you to do this. Is that traffic, does that roundabout still make sense? Do you still need to do it? No, actually things have changed. Your $2 million you really commit, we actually prefer you just to go, it's going to be a waste of money. We have another project already coming. That $2 million, the developer already finances, he's already prepared for $2 million. Is that $2 million better used for something else? Something go directly traffic impact fee credits, go widen a roadway to accommodate widening, or something else in a $2 million equivalent. I mean, there's some projects we're projecting that this is what you need 6 years from now. We get fully committed to it. And all of a sudden they come back and realize it just doesn't make sense to do anymore. You have to come up with an alternative solution. Or what if that mitigating measure is no longer needed 6 years from now? There's some things in there. I agree that once you approve it, you can't go, I can't approve filings 2, 3, 4, 5, because we're going to have some, now I believe Ricky would agree with me that actually I like multi-phase large developments because it's more cohesive. It's a better consistent development, cohesive development. They have a better chance of putting a school, a developed community than 10 different small ones because everyone's trying to skirt around this phase things. Like, if you tell me I can only predict 1 phase at a time and you can chop me off at the second filing, fine, I'll just give you 10 separate subdivisions, all coming out 1 street at a time. And I'd rather, if you really want to build 10 subdivisions worth, just encourage that. Build it cohesively and then be more of a community base than 10 separate communities. So now talking about this out loud, which I guess why we have this public forum here, that I think, you know, there's somewhere in the middle. There's not you have to come back for your second filing, do a brand new subdivision, and I can deny you at that point when you wanted to build filings 2 through 7.
Well, that's not.
Wait. Commissioner Bernardo's had his first. Go ahead, Commissioner Bernardo.
I was just looking at the applicability, number 2, B2, expansion of existing project under construction may also be subject to a traffic impact. It's just, should we not change that to shall? I mean, it's from may to shall.
My opinion,
I think we spoke about that.
Because sometimes when you do a traffic study, especially with a commercial project, you're assuming the end user. A single-family subdivision, the only thing going there is residential houses. One house, 1 unit, peak hour. When you do commercial traffic studies, commercial subdivision, we're assuming the type of end users are going to come in. Is it industrial, small business? Is it small retail? So sometimes they could be expanding the physical building space, but you go back to the original study, the use is still under the original assumption, so there's no need to do another traffic study. They already accounted for 100 trips. So that's my hesitancy on the shall when you expand a business, because sometimes the original trips or your new expansion, it's just a warehouse. It's not even generating new traffic.
Okay. Commissioner Shea Snyder.
And Sean, just kind of like what you said, I'm not saying that we should stop somebody mid-phase or in each phase. I'm absolutely not recommending that. But what I am recommending is if we do find that these traffic studies do require additional mitigation methods, we try to find ways to incorporate those mitigation methods in this mid-phase of a huge project. And that's what I'm kind of asking for. And also in the sense of a post, make sure that everything is as it says it is. I mean, we can't have any type of checks in the middle.
It's tough. I mean, think about the one on Germany that y'all talked about. I mean, what made sense at the time was funding the signal. So we found out now a roundabout's got to come in place. I mean, there's one, they didn't get out of it. It's just, and then we got stuck with spending money that probably had to get it ripped up because of the lack of flexibility. I mean, there's just a lot of what ifs with these things. But what we're trying to do here is like saying, I'm trying to predict, looking at 10-day forecast on a weather app, and I'm telling you exactly what happened on Thursday, and you're obligated to that temperature, and then we're going to be, what we're hoping for is not an extreme variance when we're doing these traffic studies. We're doing the best. We're doing a snapshot today, counting cars, projecting that people are going to drive that same exact wave, same pattern, a year and a half from now. That's tough. I mean, but you have trained traffic engineers have to have a P2E. It's a specialty of civil engineering. It's the same engineering that's required by the federal government to do an interstate. These are the same trained people that's required to get a DOTD permit. So all these higher agencies believe and invest in that traffic engineers, there is a valid point to a traffic study. So it's not garbage, but it's not exact. And even Ascension Parish acknowledges it's not exact. That's why we have traffic impact fees, because we're acknowledging there is a cumulative effect. There's going to be things we miss. We grab the money when they build a building permit and then say, ooh, we should have added 2 right turn lanes. So they have the money to go fix this problem over here to adapt quickly based on actual problems. Go add another right turn lane on Germany Road. No one development said they needed it. But with things have changed, with schools and all that, there's a cumulative effect. Let's go throw the money. I don't know if that's the exact reason, but I'm just using an example. Let's go grab the money. Let's go build a right turn lane on Germany Road right there at Airline Highway. So some of the public I hear is thinking, if everyone said the traffic study said no adverse impact, then why am I stuck in traffic? The traffic study said no adverse impact as this parish defines what's an adverse impact. It used to be a drop of level service. You can delay an intersection by 10 seconds. You never drop the level service. We just defined what's the breaking point. And there could be enough breaking points, there's a cumulative effect. That's why they have a traffic impact fee. And some of the funding mechanisms that Kennedy and Keys may come up with, we might identify certain areas that they're really stretched with infrastructure problems. There's other ways to fund to get those things to happen. So traffic studies never stated that you would not wake up in 10 years with growth and act like you never saw these additional cars. It was just, we acknowledge what's an adverse impact where that's our breaking point where you have to do something else.
Correct.
And then the parish and traffic impact fees would try to do their best with DOTD to offset the cumulative effect and the things that change over 2 to 3 years at a time.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. All right. Any other comments or a motion?
I've got a couple of amendments, so I'll go with that first. So to amend section 3D, and I'm just going to combine these unless somebody has a problem with either of them. But so then we can split them. Yeah. So basically, starting at the last set of parentheses, it'll read as follows. These holidays shall include but not be exclusive to Thanksgiving, Christmas break, spring break, Mardi Gras, Labor Day, exam weeks, and on any day in which a school has an early release day, period, close parentheses. The next sentence will stay the same, and then add another sentence that says, counts shall not be conducted during a declared state of emergency.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend 174060 by Commissioner Chason, second by Commissioner Furman. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Then I've got one more amendment to propose to section G2, and that is to take the word may in the first sentence and change it to shall. G2 under mitigation. So that's on page 7. So to change that may to shall
On the first line?
on the first line.
I thought we discussed that we really need the may here early on in the discussion because of all trying to find the right, and that there may not be a palatable mitigation.
Right.
Well, but I
So-
think the purpose is if there's not a good mitigation, but the level of service is below a D, I think the intention is that it be denied, right? Because if, I think the parish is saying by adopting this policy that if the level of service is below a D, then we do not want the development until it can come up to a D. And then we propose mitigation that the developer can undertake to bring it up to a D or better. But if it can't be done or the developer doesn't want to do that, then that's fine on them if they don't want to undertake the mitigation. But because it's not an acceptable level of service, then we have to deny it. That's my interpretation of what this has always read. I actually think it still reads that way even with the may, but given the arguments we've had in the past over may versus shall, and from my legal standpoint, with shall being, may being permissive and shall being required, that's why I'm proposing that. Is that not the intent of this article, to require a level of service a D or better?
That is the intent.
It is the intent, but it's also, but these are not the only mitigation factors that could take place. So.
Well, I mean, it could be any mitigation.
Right, so I just think that the reason why may is there is to give the flexibility so that we can hammer out mitigation factors and what have you, and because of the latitude that just because it's level of D, what if it's a level of D, but there's seconds that are being added to a traffic light? It's still a D, and I think that's the driving force.
Well, but then it can be approved because it's below a D.
Okay,
So the issue is.
So he's making a motion for the
Right.
amendment. Do you have a second? Okay, so we have a motion to amend the word may to shall by Commissioner Chason, second by Commissioner Bernardo. All in favor?
Aye.
Well, let's just go ahead and vote. Okay, voting is open.
My button's not working. There we go.
Okay. No, you gotta go here. You gotta go to the little one.
I knew that.
Commissioner Snyder? Okay, so the motion fails 3 nays to 2 nays. All right, do I have a motion on the rest of the ordinance?
I move to approve it.
As amended.
As submitted.
Okay, so
With amendments.
with amendments. Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Furman to recommend to the Parish Council adoption of Section 174060 Traffic Impact Analysis as amended by a prior motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, we need one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman? Mr.
Yes.
Chairman?
Oh, I'm sorry, you wanted to make an announcement.
Yeah, I did, thank you, and I should have announced this during the planning director's report. We're going to be having 3 meetings, public meetings throughout the parish to discuss the changes to the ULDC that we've discussed tonight, along with Batch 2. The first meeting is going to be held on the 14th of March. It's going to be at the Oak Grove Center. The second meeting is going to be at the big conference room on the administration building, and that's on the 15th. And then the third meeting is going to be in Donaldsonville at the Donaldsonville Courthouse on the 16th, all right? All those meetings will begin at 6 o'clock. We'll extend maybe an hour or two as long as we get all the discussion in, all right? But the parish president in his move to have the full disclosure to everybody would like to have those meetings, and we're going to perform those at those times.
Excellent, okay.
All right? Thank you very much.
Can you say those dates one more time?
Sure. On the 14th of March, it's going to be at Oak Grove Center in Prairieville. On the 15th of March, it's going to be at the big conference room in the administration building next door. And on the 16th of March, it's going to be the courthouse in Donaldsonville. All right? All of the meetings will be at 6, begin at 6.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tarek, thank you very, very much. Excellent work. Really appreciate all the effort that your organization is doing on this. It's really putting Ascension Parish, forward in a great way. Staff, you guys are doing a yeoman's work. I know Sean, Jerome, Eric, Lance, you guys do yeoman's work. Thank you very, very much for everything. And you can always ask Ricky for a raise. He'll give it to you. And Ricky, thank you very much. Also, your leadership is really showing through all of this. Thank you very much.
And can I just say something real quick? This is probably my last meeting, so I just want to thank the staff also for having to put up with my anal retentiveness over the last 6 years, and maybe dragging some of these meetings out. But I appreciate what y'all are doing, and y'all work hard, and also my fellow commissioners as well. We may not always agree, but it's always good debate, and I think everybody has the best interest of the parish at heart.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's been a good 6 years, and thank y'all very much.
Thank you, and best of luck on your new board.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, good night.
Last motion.
Thanks all.
No, we already did.
Good night.
Meeting's adjourned.
Oh, that was after the adjournment.